Chapter 1578. Under normal circumstances, Yi and her team would not have been able to return to the 9 states in such a short time because they were too far away. Fortunately, they managed to contact the starship of the 9 states on their way back, which saved them a lot of time. Yi wailed. No matter how Lu Yi comforted her, it was useless. He could only hug her tightly and let her vent her feelings. Hoopa moved closer and nuzzled his head against Lu Ye's body. His throat was making purring noises. This was how this guy acted when he was acting spoiled. Yaya's eyes lit up. She clapped and cheered, "Big tiger." With that, she climbed down from Lu Ye's neck and rode on Hoopa's back. Hoopa wriggled a few times then ignored her. Hoopa was very intelligent. If it were anyone else he would definitely not be happy. However, both he and Yi had already received information about Yaya from Wuxia. They knew that although this child looked like a child, she was actually a sunshine warrior. Who would dare to offend her? Yaya lay comfortably on Hoopa's back, a satisfied expression on her face. Yi cried for a long time before she slowly stopped. However, she was still choking with sobs. Lu Yi grabbed her arms and placed her in front of him. "Let me see." Yi pouted and stared at him. Suddenly she burst into laughter. She looked lovely in the rain. "You're still so small." Lu Yi looked at her with a smile. Yi was annoyed. "So what if I'm small?" "I'm small." She knew that Lu Yi had 2 hobbies, big and round. This was probably something she would never be able to touch in her life. Being small has its advantages. Lu Yi rubbed her little head. "I'll bring you with me wherever I go. I can put you in my pocket." Yi's eyes lit up. "You said it. If you dare to go back on your words, I'll. After thinking for a long time, she could not think of anything to threaten Lu Yi. Suddenly she had an idea. "I'll ask Sister Wuxia to deal with you." Lu Ye's face suddenly turned bitter. He said earnestly, "Yi, my name is Lu Ye, and yours is Lu Yi. We are a family. Wuxia is an outsider. If we have any problems we can solve them internally. Don't bother outsiders. It will make our Lu family seem insensible." Yi was even happier when she heard that. Her eyes turned into crescents. "You have a point." While the 2 of them were talking, a few more silhouettes flew over from the Jianghu peak. Lu Yi put his arm around Yi's shoulder and looked over with a smile. When he came back, he didn't see Yi and the others, so he asked Shueyuan and learned from second senior sister that the members of the 9th team of the Law Division of the military province had been promoted to Constellation 2 years ago. They went to the starry sky together and hadn't returned yet. However, Shueyuan told him not to worry. Although Yi and the others had not returned, there would be some news sent back every few days. Many of the 9 prefectures' constellations who were wandering the starry sky had seen them. Now that he saw them, he realized that the members of Team D9 had indeed been promoted to Constellation. Li Baxian, Feng Yuechan, Xiao Xinghe, Zhu Jia and Lin Yinxiu were all here. Lu Yi even saw Lan Qiyu. In more than 6 years, these people's cultivation had grown tremendously. Firstly, their aptitudes were excellent. Needless to say, Li Baxian and Feng Yuechan's aptitudes were top-notch in the entire 9 prefectures, especially Li Baxian. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to dominate the spirit stream battlefield for so many years. Zhu Jia was even more talented. Lin Yinxiu was Gan Wudong's daughter, so naturally she was like a tiger father, like a dog daughter. Lan Qiyu was even more special. As a human, she could actually become a member of the blood clan after refining the sacred blood. This talent wasn't something that just anyone could have. Among them, the one with the worst aptitude was probably 3rd senior brother Xiao Xinghe. However, that was only relatively speaking. In addition, after the 9 prefectures became a large domain, the cultivation environment was better than before. It was naturally easier to accumulate one's foundation, which led to the scene of them all being promoted to Constellation. Not only them, but many constellation seeds emerged in the new generation. In the next 10 years, the 9 prefectures would give birth to even more constellation. Looking at everyone, Lu Yi had a smile on his face. He cupped his fists and bowed, "Greetings, senior brothers and sisters." Everyone returned the greeting. Li Baxian smiled and said, "Little junior brother, you left for so many years." He was worried sick. Yi hurriedly said, "4th senior brother and the others were also very worried about you, but they didn't say anything. Instead, they often came to comfort her." "Senior brothers and sisters, thank you for your concern." Lu Yi had a guilty expression. However, at that time he was being chased by Tang Jun and was stranded in the insect path. He didn't have any chance or channel to send a message. Yi wasn't the only one who had been worried about Lu Yi all these years. Wuxia might have appeared calm when Lu Yi returned, but in reality she just didn't show it. Her worries over the past few years were no less than anyone else's. "It's good that you're back." Li Baxin nodded. "Don't just stand here. Let's talk when we get back." Second senior sister and junior sister Wuxia just made a lot of delicious food. "Let's talk while we eat." Lu Yi winked at Li Baxin. "I brought back a lot of good wine from Wanxiangxi." Li Baxin's appetite was immediately aroused. "Then I'll have to try it." On Shoujin Peak, Shui Yuan and Huaxi had indeed cooked a table of delicacies. Lu Yi took out a spiritual fish he caught from the 10,000 Elephant Sea from his storage ring and gave it to them, asking them to think of a way to cook it. Outside, everyone sat in a circle, stuffing food into their mouths as they chatted with each other. However, most of the time it was Lu Yi who was talking. Everyone listened. The more they understood, the more they yearned for a place like Wanxiangxi. They couldn't wait to go over and see the magnificent scene over there. The banquet lasted for a day and a night. The wine Lu Yi brought back from Wanxiangxi was almost finished. Even the spirit fish and shellfish caught from Wanxiangxi were mostly eaten by everyone. After eating and drinking to their fill, everyone found a place to meditate and cultivate. There was no other reason. The spirit fish and shellfish brought back by Lu Yi contained a lot of energy. If they didn't hurry and refine it, it would inevitably cause some wastage. Li Shang led a few constellations of the 9 regions who were proficient in refining tools to refine the 10,000 soul banner. A large number of constellations gathered in the 9 regions garrison hall every day to discuss the allocation of quotas for Wanxiangxi. There were too many people who wanted to go to Wanxiangxi, but there were only so many quotas. Who would go and who would stay became a problem. Moreover, not only in the 9 regions but also in the Wushuang continent, there were even fewer quotas to be allocated. On the green bamboo peak, Hupo was sleeping soundly on the ground. Yaya was lying on its back with her arms and legs spread out. She was sleeping soundly, saliva dripping from the corner of her mouth. Yi stood at the side to watch over them. In the empty square in front, 3 figures were moving and intertwining. It was Li Baxin and Xiao Xinghe working together to fight against Lu Yi. Lu Ye's long saber was not unsheathed, and his cultivation was suppressed to the early stage of constellation, the same level as 3rd and 4th senior brother. Even so, he seemed to be at ease in a 1 versus 2 situation. In the middle of the fight, Li Baxin and Xiao Xinghe suddenly stopped, revealing a thoughtful expression. "Little junior brother, is this the leaping technique you mentioned?" Li Baxin asked. "Yes." Lu Yi nodded. In the inheritance, he had only comprehended Qing Li's bearing fangs and Yan Shi's leaping technique. He had yet to fully comprehend the essence of Qing Fu's dual sabers. Compared to Qing Li's bearing fangs, Lu Yi felt that Yan Shi's leaping technique was more beneficial in battle. It was like lightning coming and going freely. If he encountered an enemy he couldn't beat in the starry sky, Qing Li's inheritance might not be useful, but Yan Shi's leaping technique would definitely be useful. If he couldn't beat the enemy he could always run. Lu Yi intended to impart the subtleties of leaping technique to Li Baxin and Xiao Xinghe, which led to this fight. Xiao Xinghe was the same as him, a weapon cultivator who used sabers. There was no doubt that he was suitable to cultivate leaping technique. Although Li Baxin was a sword cultivator, he was still a weapon cultivator in the end. If he could learn a thing or two from leaping technique, it would only be beneficial to him. Interesting. Li Baxin's eyes lit up. He was obviously interested. He and Xiao Xinghe had also used leaping technique during the battle, but it was completely incomparable to Lu Ye's leaping technique. Again? Xiao Xinghe raised his long blade, and as soon as he finished speaking, he had already rushed towards Lu Yi. Although he was only a star constellation, he could tell that this technique was extremely profound. Lu Yi had spared no effort to personally accompany and teach them, so how could he miss such an opportunity? Days passed, but the 3 figures on green bamboo peak never stopped leaping. Shui Yuan and Huaxi would cook delicacies with the spirit fish and shellfish that Lu Yi brought back from the 10,000 Elephant Sea every day. In just a short month, everyone felt that they had gained a lot. Li Shang sent a message that the 10,000 soul banner had been reforged. He needed to make another trip to Immortal Essence City. Lu Yi hurried over and brought Li Shang back to Immortal Essence City. Compared to a month ago, Immortal Essence City was much quieter now. The secret realm had been closed, and the Spirit Stream realm cultivators who came in to gain experience had also left. Beside the soul pool of the City Lord's mansion, Li Shang directly took out the 10,000 soul banner. Lu Yi looked over and found that the reforged 10,000 soul banner didn't look much different from before. Of course, this was only on the surface. He didn't understand the mystery behind it, so he couldn't see much. The banner fluttered, and Li Shang nodded slightly at Zhang Zishan. Zhang Zishan took a long step forward and gently stroked the soul pool. Ripples spread everywhere. Then, illusory figures rushed out from the soul pool and entered the 10,000 soul banner in Li Shang's hand. At first glance, this scene was quite gloomy. After all, the souls sleeping in the soul pool were all souls that had lost their physical bodies. However, these souls were all ancestors who had sacrificed their physical bodies for the peace of the 9 regions. Thinking about it this way, it wasn't too gloomy. There were more than 10,000 souls, and it lasted for half an hour before it ended. When the last soul rushed into the 10,000 soul banner, Lu Yi felt that the dense black gas on the 10,000 soul banner was so thick that it was almost solid. Zhang Zishan bowed to Li Shang. "I'll have to trouble you, fellow Taoist?" Li Shang nodded slightly. "Don't worry, City Lord. I will bring you to the ancestral land of my soul clan." Only then did Zhang Zishan enter the 10,000 soul banner and disappear. Chapter 1579. The matter of the Immortal Essence City had been resolved. The issue of the quota for the 9 continents constellation to go to the 10,000 Elephant Sea had almost come to a conclusion in these days of discussions and quarrels. Although this result did not satisfy everyone, it was still a result that everyone approved. When the cultivators of 9 continents had a firm foothold in the Wanxiang Sea in the future, others could go there if they wanted to. The journey of a few years was actually nothing to the constellations. In front of the 9 continents Guardian Hall, many constellations gathered. Star boats and tiger shark warships floated in the air. With Lu Ye's order, everyone boarded the ships. Those who were qualified to board the ships were jubilant, while those who were not were full of envy. A total of 7 planetary ships and 3 tiger shark warships had set off from the land of the 9 prefectures. In addition, there were 3 planetary ships and 2 tiger shark warships waiting for them on the Wuxia continent. The fleet of the 9 prefectures would consist of 10 planetary ships and 5 warships. Lu Yi had bought 30 star boats and 10 tiger sharks from the Wuxia island. The fleet was only a part of them, and the rest were naturally left in 9 continents and Wuxia continent. Firstly, it was for the cultivators of this world to explore the starry sky, saving them time and energy. Secondly, if they wanted to sail to the Wanxiang Sea in the future, they would have a star boat to use. Lu Yi had not only left star boats and warships in this world, but also left 5 million spiritual jades in the 9 continents Guardian Hall as a backup. With such a large amount of spiritual jades, as long as the cultivators of 9 continents used them sparingly, they should be able to use them for a long time. Moreover, they were not people who would sit around and do nothing. They could search for their own needs in the starry sky. Only in some special circumstances would they need to use the spiritual jades left by Lu Yi. Lu Yi also left a large number of twin-chi-linked formation discs for the cultivators of 9 continents to form formations to fight the enemy. There were also star charts to the Qingli Dao world and the Wanxiang Sea, and even some of the trunks of the reincarnation tree. Everything was ready. Lu Yi looked down at the many constellations of 9 continents who were sending him off. He cupped his fists and said, "Thank you for taking care of this world." Pang Zhen, who was the leader, grinned and said, "Don't worry. With us here, there won't be any trouble in this world. On the other hand, when you go out, you have to endure what you have to endure. Don't force yourself in everything. If it's really difficult to survive outside, come back early." It was just like how the elders would exhort their children when they went out to make a living. Lu Yi nodded and jumped onto the star boat. With a wave of his hand he said, "Let's go." All the star boats and battleships turned around and flew out of the 9 provinces at an increasing speed. With Pang Zhen as the leader, the many star mansions that stayed behind cupped their fists and sent him off. They shouted in unison, "May fortune prevail and turn misfortune into blessings." On the star boat, Lu Yi lowered his head and looked down at the 9 prefectures. He raised his hand and pressed it on his battlefield imprint. His divine will surged as he said, "Little 9, I'm leaving. Please take care of the 9 prefectures." In the past few days when he was preparing to leave, he had looked for Little 9 several times, wanting to bid farewell to it, but Little 9 had completely ignored him. Lu Yi naturally knew that it was impossible for Little 9 to not notice his call, and the reason it ignored him was probably because it did not want him to leave. In the entire 9 states besides Lu Yi, only Zhang Zishan knew of its existence. In the past, when Lu Yi was not around, it could occasionally chat with Zhang Zishan. Now that Zhang Zishan had been taken into the 10,000 soul banner and was about to be taken to the Spirita's ancestral land, the only person it could communicate with was Lu Yi. If Lu Yi also left, then Little 9 could only guard the 9 prefectures by itself. It was like a clingy little child, but there were some things that had to be done. Although it was safe to stay in the 9 prefectures and there were not many dangers outside, since the 9 prefectures had been promoted to a large realm, it would eventually be connected to the starry skies. Only when the realm's foundation became stronger would it have enough strength to protect itself when it encountered danger in the future. After waiting for a while, there was still no response from Little Nine. Lu Yi sighed. He knew that the child was angry, so he did not force it. But at this moment, Little Nine's voice suddenly sounded in his ear. Then when you come back next time, bring back some good food. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment before he realized that the good food Little Nine was talking about was the World Eater Beast Crystal Core he had taken out last time, as well as the pink strange object he had obtained from the Nebula Grave Bag. Okay. I'll bring more for you next time. Lu Yi immediately agreed. He probably could not count on the things in the Nebula Grave Bag, but if there was no other way he would think of a way to bring back the World Eater Beast Crystal Core. He could not disappoint Little Nine. Although the World Eater Beast Crystal Core was rare, as long as he thought of a way, it was still possible to obtain it. Then it's a deal. It's a deal. Lu Yi replied. Suddenly he sensed something. When he looked down, he saw a rabbit standing up on a mountain not far from the 9 provinces guard palace, looking in their direction. Lu Yi waved his hand in its direction, and the planetary ship rushed out of the clouds and into the starry sky. The fleet entered the starry sky. The cultivators piloting the planetary ships were fine, as they obediently piloted the planetary ships according to the star chart. However, the cultivators assigned to the Tiger Shark warships were excited. After all, none of them had ever played with a warship before, so they were all familiarizing themselves with the various functions of a warship. This caused the 3 warships escorting the fleet to be like naughty children, chasing each other and dodging as they sailed. The Tiger Shark warships were small warships that could be piloted by 3 to 5 people. Compared to those expensive large warships, although their defense and attack were slightly inferior, they were more agile. At first, everyone was not familiar with the warships, so it was inevitable that they were a little shaky at piloting them. However, as they gradually familiarized themselves with the warships, the 3 Tiger Shark warships became much more agile. Lu Yi stood on the deck and watched quietly. The planetary ship he was on was basically filled with people he was close to, including Wuxia, Shueyuan, and the members of Team D9. Hu Po was lying at his feet, and Yaya was curled up in Hu Po's arms. Beside them were Yi and Li Shang. Perhaps because they were both souls, Li Shang had a natural sense of closeness to Yi. Although they had only met for a few days, the 2 of them had already become familiar with each other. After interacting with Li Shang for such a long time, Lu Yi had a rough understanding of Li Shang's temperament. She was not the kind of person who could quickly become familiar with strangers. Take Huaxi and Shui Yuan for example. Although Li Shang would occasionally chat with them, they were not close. However, Li Shang's attitude towards Yi was completely different. She truly treated her as one of her own. Lu Yi faintly felt that there might be some other reasons. After chatting for a while, Yi called Hu Pa and prepared to cultivate. Since she had advanced to Constellation Realm 2 years ago, Yi thought that the gap between her and Lu Yi would become smaller. However, when Lu Yi returned this time, he was already at the late stage of Constellation Realm. Not only did the gap between their cultivations not become smaller, it had become much larger. Therefore, Yi did not dare to slack off when it came to cultivation, and worked even harder than before. Hu Pa left and Yaya rubbed her sleepy eyes. She sat on the ground and looked around blankly for a while, then silently grabbed Lu Ye's pants and climbed up like a monkey. She squeezed into Lu Ye's arms, found a comfortable sleeping position and closed her eyes again. Lu Yi held her with one hand and looked down for a while, then said, Yaya has been a little sleepy recently. Although Yaya was always sleepy before, the situation was not so serious. Only after using sunshine would Yaya fall into a deep sleep. Most of the time she was awake. But recently she was obviously different, especially when she was by Hu Po's side. Almost as long as she was in contact with Hu Po, she would fall asleep. Maybe she's recovering and her sleepiness is just an external manifestation of her recovery. Li Shang guessed. Lu Yi nodded but soon realized a problem. Say, if she recovers, will she do anything to us? Yaya was still sunshine after all. Now that her mind was damaged, she mistook him and Li Shang for her parents. When she recovers and recalls the past, what if she flew into a rage out of humiliation? What could Lu Yi use to block it? At that time he and Li Shang would both be out of luck. Li Shang said, her mind is seriously damaged, she won't be able to recover in a short period of time. Moreover, this matter is not our fault. Even if she really recovers, she should know that it was her own initiative. Besides, you did save her life. That's the truth. Lu Yi agreed. When he saved Yaya he had considered this. Li Shang hesitated for a moment, then changed the topic. Do you know why Yaya is sticking to Hu Pe? Lu Yi thought to himself, here comes the main topic, because he found that since Li Shang saw Hu Pe she was very interested in Hu Pe, and quickly became familiar with Yi was also part of the reason. Instead of answering he asked, do you know? Li Shang nodded, then shook her head. I don't know the specific reason, but Yaya has Sunshine's background. She is sticking to Hu Pe not only because he is likable, there must be a deeper reason. Maybe she instinctively feels that staying by Hu Pe's side can help her recover better. After a pause she continued, Hu Pe should have the blood of the white tiger, do you know? I have a guess. The white tiger of the 4 sacred beasts was famous. How could Lu Yi not know? After all, the former 9 regions was the top region. Although it had declined for tens of thousands of years, some of the remnants of the former 9 regions could still be seen in the current 9 regions. Hu Pe's blood should be passed down from generation to generation in the former 9 regions era. Lu Yi had come into contact with many tiger-type monsters, but there had never been a monster like Hu Pe who could transform into a depressed spirit, so Lu Yi's speculation about Hu Pe's blood was not a lie. Ordinary tiger-type monsters did not have such a magical ability, and only the legendary white tiger had such an ability. But guesses were guesses, and there was no way to confirm this fact. After all, he had never seen another white tiger. It is said that the white tiger is in charge of killing, and among the 4 sacred beasts, its killing power is the fiercest. Li Shang's leisurely voice came, but very few people know that the white tiger has a natural advantage over souls. What do you mean? Lu Yi asked humbly. Li Shang suddenly mentioning Hu Pe was obviously not on a whim. These days she had been observing Hu Pe, and since she said so, she obviously had a conclusion. Chapter 1580. In fact, there was no soul race in this world because it's difficult for a pure soul to survive in the world for too long. The earliest soul race was like Yi, transformed from a strange beast like Hu Pe. Li Shang said, your soul race was born like this? Lu Yi was surprised. If that was the case, didn't it mean that the soul race also had a white tiger? Li Shang shook his head. That's not the case. The birth of the soul race relies on the existence of a divine object, which is also the treasure of my soul race. Our birth is different from Yi's. I'm just saying that the earliest soul race was in existence like Yi. Lu Yi understood and realized that he had misunderstood. Li Shang continued, for Yi, Hu Pe is her support, just like how the immortal origin guards are now relying on the 10,000 soul banner. If Hu Pe dies, Yi can't live alone, but on the other hand, nothing will happen to Hu Pe. This is a different kind of symbiosis. Lu Yi nodded. He already knew about these things, just like the life origin technique that he and Hu Pe had formed before. The reason why he wanted to remove the life origin technique was that he was afraid that one day he would be unlucky and implicate Hu Pe and Yi. Fortunately, he had already deduced the life origin technique before, so after returning this time, Lu Yi had already removed it. Without the life origin technique, Lu Yi would not be able to borrow strength from Hu Pe in the future, let alone use the beast transformation secret technique. Even if Lu Yi encountered any misfortune, he would not implicate Hu Pe. This kind of strange symbiosis is of great benefit to Hu Pe and Yi. Their cultivation can benefit each other at the same time. In other words, other people's cultivation is their own business, but their cultivation can bring benefits to each other. Lu Yi had noticed this long ago. This was also the reason why Hu Pe and Yi could grow so quickly. The lack of resources was secondary, and the most important reason was that their cultivation was double the happiness. Don't look at how Hu Pe and Yi's cultivation was on par with many constellations in 9 regions. As time passed, their cultivation would slowly pull apart. Lu Yi didn't expect Li Shang to know this secret. It seemed that Li Shang really understood the 4 sacred beasts, white tigers. This was obviously not the result of Li Shang's recent observation. A few days of observation could not have come to such a conclusion, unless he knew it long ago. Are you curious why I know this? Li Shang saw the change in Lu Yi's expression and smiled. Before Lu Yi could ask, he took the initiative to explain. If there is a race in this world that understands the white tiger, it is none other than my soul race. Since ancient times, my soul race has always been the most natural ally of the white tiger. To my race, the white tiger is an existence akin to a sacred beast. In the recorded history of my soul race, there have been a total of 6 sacred beasts like Hu Pe. Each one of them has left behind an inextinguishable mark in the history of my soul race. The title of Holy Beast was not something that could be casually given. It required worship and sincere reverence from the bottom of one's heart. Lu Yi then recalled that even when Hu Po was very weak, the tiger's roar still had the miraculous effect of deterring the soul. There had once been an enemy whose mind had been shaken by Hu Po's tiger's roar and then killed by Lu Yi with a single slash of his blade. From the looks of it, all of Hu Po's abilities were related to the soul. The soul race was a soul to begin with, so they were the most knowledgeable about the soul. Fellow Taoist, I want to ask you for a favor. Li Shang's expression suddenly turned solemn. Lu Yi asked, what is it? I want to bring Hu Po back to the ancestral land. Li Shang said, don't worry, friend. A sacred beast like Hu Po will only be worshipped by my race in the ancestral land. It will not be treated badly. Lu Yi ridiculed, doesn't the ancestral land of the soul race not allow outsiders to enter? Forget about the immortal Yuan guards. They were soul bodies after all, and Li Shang could barely be considered clansmen. Bring them back, but Hu Po was not a soul body. It's not the same. Since the last sacred beast passed away, the ancestral land has not had a sacred beast for thousands of years. If I bring Hu Po back, my clansmen will only welcome me. Lu Yi finally understood why Li Shang was so interested in Hu Po these past few days. It turned out that he had this idea. If it was really like what Li Shang said, it was not impossible for her to bring Hu Po back. Moreover, Li Shang had helped him so much this time. The immortal Yuan guards would also be able to find a place to settle down in the future, so he should repay Li Shang. It was just that Hu Po was not his familiar. They had known each other since they were weak. They had gone through thick and thin together. Lu Yi regarded Hu Po and Yi as his own family. There were some things that he could not casually decide. What's more, if Hu Po was taken, Yi would inevitably follow. The two of them were inseparable, and Lu Yi himself was somewhat reluctant to part with them. Seeing Lu Yi hesitating, Li Shang quickly said, friend, let's not talk about the benefits of Hu Po after entering the ancestral land. Let's talk about Yi. In the past few days, I have observed that Yi has taken the orthodox path of cultivation, but this is not the real cultivation method of my soul race. No one taught her before, but if she returns to the ancestral land with me, she can practice all kinds of secret techniques of my soul race. Her path of cultivation has been wrong. Even if her cultivation is successful in the future, it is impossible for her to exert her full potential. Don't you want to set things right? Lu Yi was stunned. Yi was already a star constellation, and now someone came to tell him that Yi had taken the wrong path. But thinking about it carefully, Li Shang should not be an alarmist. After all, there had never been an existence like Yi in Jianghu before. No one knew how she should cultivate correctly. Looking at it now, soul cultivation naturally had to focus on the soul. Taking the orthodox path of cultivation was indeed not right. If she could go with Li Shang to the ancestral land of the soul race, Yi would definitely benefit a lot. What benefits does Hu Po have? Lu Yi asked. Li Shang said, I can guarantee that the race will choose the most outstanding clansmen to live with it. In this way, its growth speed will increase, and correspondingly, Yi's growth speed will also increase. Lu Yi understood. So the previous sacred beasts of your soul race had reached a symbiotic relationship with the most outstanding clansmen, so that it would be mutually beneficial? Li Shang nodded. Yes, the more clansmen the sacred beast has, the faster it and its clansmen will grow, and the upper limit will be higher. In your records, how many clansmen can a sacred beast form a symbiotic relationship with? 9 clansmen. Li Shang replied in a deep voice. In that generation of the 9 clansmen, except for 4 who died in succession midway, the remaining 5 all advanced to sunshine. However, the number of clansmen the sacred beast can form a symbiotic relationship with varies. Some have more, some have less, and this may be related to the sacred beast's mood. If you want to form a symbiotic relationship, you must gain the sacred beast's trust and let it take the initiative. It is not something my soul race can force. This was not bad. The initiative was completely in Hu Po's hands, so they could avoid some dirty tricks in the dark. Fellow Taoist, let me bring Hu Po and Yi back to the ancestral land. For them, there are only benefits and no disadvantages. Li Shang looked at Lu Yi pleadingly. I believe you. Lu Yi nodded, but I can't make the decision. If you really want to bring them back, you have to ask their own opinions. If they are willing to go with you, I won't stop them, but if they are unwilling, there is no need to force them. Li Shang was overjoyed. As long as fellow Taoist has no objections, then there is no problem. Looking at the happy Li Shang, Lu Yi only felt that she was a little naive. On Hu Po's side, Yi was definitely the leader, and Yi definitely wasn't willing to be separated from him again. Therefore, Lu Yi felt that it would be difficult for Li Shang to persuade Yi to go to the Spirita's ancestral land. Li Shang left with light steps, obviously wanting to persuade Yi. However, Yi had just started cultivating, so she might have to wait for a while. Yaya was still sleeping in her arms. Lu Yi looked down. Although she did not know why Yaya was so attached to Hoopa, perhaps Hoopa really had some ability to help her recover. The 3 tiger shark warships ahead were still chasing and fleeing, having a lot of fun. Lu Yi turned around and entered her cabin. She put Yaya on the bed and sat next to her, the Pan Mountain saber across her knees. She immersed her mind and entered the blue hall. In the next moment, the saber light slashed continuously. The 9 prefectures were only half a month away from Wushuang continent. When the fleet arrived near Wushuang continent, there were already 3 star boats and 2 tiger shark warships waiting. The number of constellations on Wushuang continent was smaller than that of the 9 prefectures, so the quota allocated was much smaller. Lu Yi finally saw the sect master and eldest senior brother. The last time he passed by here, they were still exploring the starry sky and did not have the chance to meet. After the news spread, the sect master and the others hurried back to Wushuang continent to discuss the quota to follow Lu Yi to the Wanxiang Sea. Lu Yi led several people from the Jade Blood sect forward and bowed respectfully. He owed the sect master a debt of gratitude. If the sect master had not accepted him into the Blue Blood sect, Lu Ye's cultivation path would not have been so smooth. His master Yun Xuechu had also taught him. Lu Ye's Tao of Spirit tattoos was basically taught by his master. Although he had surpassed his master, he relied more on the power of the talent tree. In terms of Tao of spiritual tattoos alone, Lu Yi felt that he could not compare with his master. The sect master and his master had a love-hate relationship for many years. Lu Yi had never been clear about the specific reasons, but he thought it had something to do with their experiences when they were young. Now that they were constellations, their relationship was much better. Moreover, the sect master looked younger now. Although the sect master was not old before, he was obviously a little older. But now he looked like a middle-aged man in his 40s. After a long separation, they naturally had a lot to talk about. On the star boat, Lu Yi hosted a banquet to entertain the sect master and the others. The spiritual fish from the Wanxiang Sea won everyone's praise. The fleet did not stop at Wushuang continent. After meeting with each other, they continued to sail forward. The fleet of 10 star boats and 5 tiger shark warships was not large but not shabby. Chapter 1581. A few days later, Lu Yi jumped out of the fleet and took out his star boat. He drove it with all his might and rushed towards the Qingli Dao world. He wanted to go there first to see how the Qingli Dao world was doing. He was not worried about the Qingli Dao world but the Jade Conch world. With the jade slip that Tang Jun gave him, he believed that Wu Zhuo would trust him and be willing to cooperate with him. However, he was not sure about the situation in the Jade Conch world. He did not have time to go to the Jade Conch world, so he could only ask Wu Zhuo to go there. Lu Yi did not know what the situation was, so he could only go and see. It would be best if the Jade Conch world was willing to go to the Wanxiang Sea with him. Cultivators from the same galaxy would have a natural closeness, and it would be easier for them to cooperate. Besides, if they wanted to establish themselves in the Wanxiang Sea, they would need Yu Yao from the Jade Conch world. If the Jade Conch world was not willing, Lu Yi would not force it. However, this was a good thing for any realm, so Lu Yi guessed that the Jade Conch world would be interested. No matter what, he would go there first to have a look. Although the fleet was not slow, it would be faster if he went alone. 2 months later, the Qingli Dao world came into view. Lu Yi saw someone squatting outside the world from afar, looking at him in boredom. When he got closer, he realized that it was a girl he knew. Tang Xiaoya, what are you doing here? Lu Yi stopped the star boat and looked ahead. Tang Xiaoya bowed and said, Greetings, senior brother. I was ordered by Hall Master Wu to wait for you here. Did Hall Master Wu have any orders? Tang Xiaoya said, Hall Master Wu said that if you came, I should bring you to the Divine Martial Hall. This way, please. Lu Yi suddenly understood that Tang Xiaoya was arranged here to wait for him. This arrangement was reasonable. Lu Yi was close to Tang Jun, so Wu Zhuo asked Tang Xiaoya to come forward. It would be easier to talk to her. Lu Yi kept the star boat and flew into the realm with Tang Xiaoya. As he flew, he asked, Is Hall Master Wu back? He returned half a month ago. Tang Xiaoya replied. Do you know what's going on in the Jade Conch realm? Lu Yi asked again. I don't know the exact situation, but when Hall Master Wu returned half a month ago, Yu Luo also brought over 100 people. The leader was a late-stage Yu Yao. When Lu Yi heard this, he knew that this matter was settled. The people from Yu Luo must be going to the 10,000 Elephant Sea together. However, 100 people was not enough. This was understandable. Lu Yi and the others knew that they couldn't put all their eggs in one basket. The 9 continents constellation only brought a part of it over. Yukong must have thought the same. First, he would send 100 people to scout the way and see what the situation was like at the 10,000 Elephant Sea. If it was suitable, it wouldn't be too late to send more people. Moreover, the leader of the other party was a late-stage Moon Jade. Jade Kong should be quite concerned about this. Tang Xiaoya whispered again, "Senior brother, the martial arts hall master wanted me to inform you that Yu Yao from the Jade Kong sect has a rather arrogant personality. If she makes senior brother uncomfortable, please don't take it to heart." The martial arts hall master said that the people from the Jade Kong sect are all like that. Lu Yi nodded. Understood. This was what Tang Jun had told him when he first set off from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. It was not hard to understand. The Jade Kong sect was the leader of this galaxy after all. They were the most powerful. It was normal for them to act like a big brother. As they spoke, they arrived outside the main hall of the Divine Martial Hall. There were many constellations scattered outside the hall. It looked like they were all from the Jade Kong sect. Tang Xiaoya led Lu Yi to the outside of the hall. She cupped her fists and said, "Martial arts hall master, senior brother Lu Yi is here. Please." Wu Zhu's powerful voice came from inside the hall. Lu Yi nodded at Tang Xiaoya, who was beside him, and walked forward. However, he had only taken a few steps when someone suddenly blocked his path. That person was dressed in tight black clothes and held a long saber in his hand. He stood in front of the hall and looked at Lu Yi. Then he raised his hand slightly and cupped his fists. "Jade Kong Shichuan, please enlighten me." Lu Yi frowned. At the same time, Wu Zhu frowned and looked at a woman beside him. "Daoist Wan, what is the meaning of this?" After all, this was the Qingli Dao world. Lu Yi was considered a guest here. As the host, he had already invited him in. However, he was stopped by the people from the Jade Kong sect. Moreover, Shichuan's attitude clearly showed that he wanted to fight with Lu Yi. Wu Zhu naturally knew that this was not Shichuan's idea. This must have been secretly instructed by the woman opposite him. Therefore Wu Zhu could not understand why. If the Jade Kong sect was not interested in the 10,000 Elephant Sea, they would not have sent a late-stage Yueyao cultivator here with 100 constellations. However, since they were already here, why would they cause trouble for no reason? A tall woman sat opposite Wu Zhu. She was dressed in a snow-white close-fitting dress. Her beautiful hair was tied into a high ponytail, which showed that she was very capable. This woman was the leader of the Jade Kong sect this time, Wan Xiao. Wan Xiao was a late-stage Yueyao cultivator. She was one of the top cultivators in the entire Jade Kong sect. The fact that she was leading the team to the 10,000 Elephant Sea showed how important this matter was to the Jade Kong sect. What the Jade Kong sect lacked the most was sunshine. However, it was not that easy for a Yueyao cultivator to reach the sunshine level. The late-stage Yueyao cultivators of the Jade Kong sect had been cultivating diligently for many years, but they had not made any progress. For this reason, they had traveled everywhere in search of an opportunity to break through, but to no avail. After all, the Jade Kong sect was located in a remote area. There were no good places to travel around. A place like the 10,000 Elephant Sea was undoubtedly their best opportunity. Compared to traveling everywhere, going to the 10,000 Elephant Sea and interacting with more Yueyao cultivators and even having the opportunity to learn from sunshine-level cultivators was something that they had always dreamed of. Therefore, when Wu Zhu came looking for them, the Jade Kong sect did not hesitate and decided that Wan Xiao would lead the team to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Going to the 10,000 Elephant Sea was not only to find a way out for the constellations in their realm, but also to reach the sunshine level. As long as the Jade Kong sect could produce sunshine, the realm's level would be different. However, Wan Xiao did have her own reasons for secretly instructing Shichuan to do what he did. This was because if things were to develop according to plan, Lu Yi would definitely be in charge of this trip. After all, he had rushed all the way back from the 10,000 Elephant Sea. No one was more familiar with the route than him. However, the Jade Kong sect cultivators were arrogant. They even looked down on the people from the Qingli Dao world. How could they allow a newly promoted realm to stand above them and order them around? It was normal for cultivators to spar with each other. If this Lu Yi from the Nine Heavens could recognize the strength of the Jade Kong sect cultivators, he would naturally give up the authority to lead. It was not convenient for Wan Xiao to do it herself. Shichuan was the best candidate because he was also a late-stage constellation cultivator. Moreover, like Lu Yi, he was a saber cultivator. Wan Xiao believed that as a late-stage constellation cultivator, this cultivator from the Nine Heavens realm would definitely not be Shichuan's match. That was what she thought, but she had another explanation for Wu Zhu. Yuan Xiao's cold voice sounded, "Fellow Taoist Wu, you said that this Lu Ye grew up in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. His cultivation speed is very fast and his strength seems to be quite good. He is even stronger than the late-stage constellation cultivators from your hall?" "Yes," Wu Zhuo replied in a low voice. He had already heard about the Clear Wind Realm from his own disciple, Zhou Dingtian. If Zhou Dingtian was not lying, then Lu Ye's strength was not just a little bit stronger than his. Words are no proof. You will know when you see it with your own eyes. We are all going to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Let's see how strong the cultivators there are. If they are strong, then it means that the 10,000 Elephant Sea is worth looking forward to. If they are weak, then it means that the 10,000 Elephant Sea is just SOSO. We don't have to be too concerned. Wu Zhuo opened his mouth and wanted to remind her, but he did not say anything. He also wanted to see if Lu Ye's strength was as terrifying as Zhou Dingtian said. After all, no matter how strong a late-stage constellation cultivator was, there was still a limit. He had heard of this Sichuan. It was said that he was one of the strongest cultivators in this generation's Jade Conch constellation. It was because of this that he joined the team heading to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. The two of them conversed very quickly. After they finished speaking, they looked outside the hall. Although they could not see the situation outside, they could see everything outside with their divine senses. Outside the hall, Lu Ye looked at Sichuan, who suddenly jumped out. Although he was not sure of his intentions, there were only a few possibilities. Combined with the fact that this person came from the Jade Conch constellation, he had a rough guess. He probably wanted to see the strength of the 9 prefectures' cultivators before cooperating. Since that was the case, Lu Ye had no reason to back down. He secretly decided to perform well. Otherwise, if they cooperated later, the other party might not take the 9 prefectures' cultivators seriously. 9 heavens, Lu Ye. Lu Ye replied. Sichuan slowly unsheathed the long saber at his waist. The saber was slightly different from the Panshan saber. It was slightly curved, but from the spiritual light on the saber, one could tell that it was an outstanding spiritual treasure. Sichuan held the saber with one hand and said with a serious expression, "We're both weapon cultivators, so let's make it simple?" "No problem." Lu Ye nodded, but he had no intention of unsheathing his saber. Sichuan waited for a few breaths. Seeing that Lu Ye still did not move, he could not help but frown. His aura began to circulate and rise. Many Jade Conch constellation cultivators looked over, as if they were waiting to watch a good show. Someone said, "Guess how many sabers can this person take from Senior Shi?" Someone laughed and said, "Senior Shi started off on the path of body cultivator. His brute force is invincible among his peers. Although he later changed to weapon cultivator, he did not lose his body cultivator foundation. If this person fights with Senior Shi, I think he won't be able to take 5 sabers. It's not bad if he can take 5 sabers from Senior Shi. I bet he'll lose in 3 sabers. Although they are all late-stage constellation cultivators, not all of them are as strong as Senior Shi. In our Jade Conch constellation, there are not many constellation cultivators who can take 5 sabers from Senior Shi. Chapter 1582. I'm going to attack. Sichuan reminded him out of goodwill. His spiritual power surged as he pounced in front of Lu Ye like a bolt of lightning. The long saber in his hand slashed down fiercely. The power of this saber was not obvious on the surface, but it was completely contained within. It was clear that he had perfect control of his own power. Inside the Grand Hall, Yuan Xiao nodded slightly. Among the constellations of this generation, Sichuan's strength was about the same as the others. However, Yuan Xiao thought the most highly of Sichuan. This was because his control over his own strength was stronger than the others. As such, once he ascended to Yu Yao, there would be a natural gap between him and the others. Wu Zhuo also felt the power of this saber and sighed in his heart. Jade Conch was still Jade Conch after all. Compared to Sichuan, there was indeed a big gap. If Sichuan's strength was placed in the Qingli Dao world, he would be invincible among his peers. However, he was not more concerned about Sichuan, but Lu Ye, who was calm and composed. Even when Sichuan's long saber slashed down, his expression did not change at all. When Sichuan's long saber fell, there was a clanging sound. Lu Ye's long saber was unsheathed. There was no fanciful movement. It was almost the same way at the same angle and slashed out. Wu Zhuo raised his eyebrows. The moment Lu Ye attacked, he noticed that Lu Ye's speed was faster than Sichuan's. Therefore, even if he attacked later, he did not fall into a disadvantage. Under everyone's gaze, the 2 long sabers collided. It was like two mortals slashing at each other, without the slightest burst of spiritual power. However, in the next moment, spiritual power burst out from where the long sabers collided, and a visible saber halo spread out in all directions. Many people in Jade Kong's constellations had a playful expression on their faces, as if they were watching a good show. However, at this moment, all their expressions froze and turned into astonishment. As the saber halo spread out, Lu Ye's body did not move. Instead, Sichuan's body shook violently and his body involuntarily leaned back. Some people could not suppress the shock in their hearts and could not help but exclaim. More people widened their eyes, unable to believe what they were seeing. In this collision, Sichuan was obviously at a disadvantage. This was simply unbelievable. What was even more unbelievable was that before Sichuan could stabilize his body, Lu Ye's second slash had already landed. Sichuan immediately roared and hurriedly raised his saber to block. However, after the second collision, his reaction was even more violent than before. His body leaned back much more. The floor under his feet turned into powder, and his 2 feet were deeply embedded in it. The power that was originally restrained and not obvious was now extremely lax. He suddenly raised his other hand and gripped his saber with both hands. He could only watch as Lu Ye's third slash swept over him. Then he was sent flying back into the hall. The Jade Kong constellation, which was watching from all sides, was dumbstruck. The cultivator who said that Lu Yi wouldn't be able to withstand Sichuan's 3 strikes had a stiff expression on his face as the corners of his eyes twitched wildly. From the looks of it, Lu Yi indeed couldn't withstand the 3 strikes, but Sichuan was the one who couldn't withstand Lu Ye's 3 strikes. He suspected that Lu Yi had heard what he said and did it on purpose. If that was the case, then it was too terrifying. Sichuan was already one of the most powerful constellations in the Jade Kong constellation. However, such a powerful constellation had been sent flying by 3 strikes. Moreover, judging from Lu Ye's expression, his face wasn't red, and his heart wasn't beating fast. It was obvious that he hadn't used his full strength. Could a constellation be this strong? Was Yu Yao in disguise? Everyone stared at Lu Yi in shock. After witnessing this inconceivable scene with their own eyes, they felt as if a new door was slowly opening in front of them. Amidst the absolute silence, Lu Yi sheathed his saber. "Thank you for letting me win." He stepped forward and walked into the hall. Qing Fu's dual saber technique was indeed very powerful. Although Lu Yi hadn't passed Qing Fu's test yet, after so many trials, he had at least grasped some of its essence. Although Lu Yi had fought with only his saber, he had used some of the subtleties of Qing Fu's dual saber technique. The core of dual saber technique was that each strike was heavier than the last, and each strike was faster than the last. Lu Yi had struck Sichuan 3 times, and each strike was heavier and faster than the last. Of course, Sichuan couldn't withstand it. Even if he did, Lu Yi still had a 4th and 5th strike. There would be a time when he couldn't withstand it. When he entered the hall, he immediately saw Wuxia and a girl with a high ponytail. At this moment, the 2 Yu Yao stared at Lu Yi in shock. Although Wuxia had heard about the Clear Wind Realm from Zhou Dingtian and knew that Lu Yi was very strong, he hadn't expected him to be this strong. He had thought that even if Lu Yi could win against Sichuan, it would only be a small victory. But in the end, it was like the autumn wind sweeping away fallen leaves. One of the most outstanding constellations in the Jade Kong sect was like a child in front of him. Wan Xiaoa hadn't expected such a ridiculous thing to happen in this world. When she was a constellation, her strength wasn't much weaker than Sichuan's. She had thought that this was about the limit of a constellation. Who knew that she was a frog at the bottom of a well? She had wanted Sichuan to suppress this Lu Yi of the 9 heavens. But now, not only had she failed to suppress him, she had even allowed him to show off his strength. She had clearly felt that Sichuan wasn't a match for him, not only because his physical strength wasn't as strong as his opponent's, but also because their spiritual energy had collapsed upon contact. In other words, Lu Yi's spiritual energy was much purer and more vigorous than Sichuan's. His strength and spiritual energy were both inferior. How could he be a match for him in a head-on collision without any fancy moves? And when Lu Yi of the 9 heavens attacked, he had used the back of his blade. Sichuan might not have noticed this, but he couldn't hide it from her and Wuxia's perception. The reason why Lu Yi had used the back of his blade was because he was afraid of damaging Sichuan's spiritual artifact blade. The current Pan Mountain blade was transformed from the soldier race. Its sharpness couldn't be compared to ordinary spiritual artifacts. In such a collision, it was very likely that it would cause damage to the enemy's weapon. Lu Yi only wanted to display the strength of a cultivator of the 9 continents. He didn't want to make enemies, so he naturally had to restrain himself. Shi Chuan stood next to Wan Xiao. The hand holding the blade was still trembling violently. The web between his thumb and forefinger had cracked and blood was flowing out. His face was green and red. It was obvious that he hadn't recovered from his previous defeat. Before he attacked, he had considered whether he should leave some face for Lu Yi and not suppress him too ruthlessly. In the end, he didn't expect that he would be the one being suppressed. After a moment of silence, Shi Chuan took a deep breath and bowed to Lu Yi. I've learned something. It was common for cultivators to lose in a battle. As one of the most outstanding constellations in Yuluo, Shi Chuan could quickly adjust his mentality and learn from it. It could be seen that he was a cultivator with a good temperament. Wan Xiao also said, victory and defeat are commonplace. It's a blessing to be able to meet someone stronger than you. Only then can you have a goal to pursue in your cultivation. Yes. Shi Chuan responded. He glanced at Lu Yi again before retreating. Lu Yi cupped his fists and bowed. Greetings, fellow Taoist Wu. Wu Zhuo returned the greeting. The last time he had met Lu Yi, he had wanted to test Lu Ye's strength and let him know if he was qualified to be friends with him. However, after witnessing Lu Ye's battle with Shi Chuan, he knew that once Lu Yi was promoted to Yu Yao, his strength would not be inferior to his own. It wouldn't be difficult for such a person to be promoted to Yu Yao. He indeed had the qualifications to be his friend. He took the initiative to introduce her to Lu Yi. This is Yu Luo Xiao, fellow Taoist Wan. Lu Yi bowed again. Greetings, fellow Taoist Wan. Wan Xiao nodded slightly and didn't say anything. However, there was a hint of curiosity in her cold eyes. She had never seen a constellation like Lu Yi before. Sit down and talk. Wu Zhuo gestured with his hand. Lu Yi didn't stand on ceremony and sat down in the seat below Wu Zhuo. Wan Xiao sat opposite him. Fellow Taoist, can I tell you about Qing Li and Yu Luo's arrangement? Wu Zhuo took the initiative to start the conversation. Lu Yi said, please go ahead, Hall Master Wu. Wu Zhuo said, after you left last time, I made an urgent trip to Yu Luo's domain. Yu Luo's domain is very interested in the Thousand Elephant Sea. Hence, they decided to let fellow Taoist Wan lead the team and send out 100 constellations. Now they are all waiting in my Qingli Dao world. As for my Qingli Dao world, I will also send out 100 constellations and 200 people from Yu Luo's domain. However, I have to stay in my own domain and can't accompany them. It's a pity that I can't witness the magnificence of the Thousand Elephant Sea with my own eyes. Yu Luo's domain sent out 100 constellations because they were cautious. After all, they knew nothing about the Thousand Elephant Sea. It was enough to have Yu Yao as their leader. Qingli Dao world only sent out 100 people. It was probably because they were limited by Yu Luo's domain and couldn't send out too many people. Wu Zhuo continued, however, don't worry, fellow Taoist. 30% of the constellations sent by Qingli Dao world and Yu Luo's domain are in the late stage. The remaining 70% are in the middle stage. Lu Yi nodded and said, you can make your own decisions regarding the manpower of your two domains. This joint venture into the Thousand Elephant Sea is just the beginning. It won't be too late to make decisions based on the situation in the future when there are results. Wu Zhuo said, I think so too. Wan Xiao suddenly said, how many people are the Nine Heavens realms sending out? Lu Yi said, a total of 300 people. However, they are all in the early stage of constellation. Therefore, their cultivation can't be compared to your two domains. Wan Xiao said, is the Nine Heavens realm really just a newly promoted large-sized domain? Previously, when she heard Wu Zhuo say that the Nine Heavens realm was a newly promoted large-sized domain, she didn't doubt it. However, after seeing Lu Ye's strength and cultivation, she was puzzled. Now that she heard that the Nine Heavens realm was sending out all their early-stage constellations, she was really confused. Our domain has been promoted to large-sized domain for less than 10 years. Lu Yi replied seriously. Wan Xiao said, but fellow Taoist cultivation. A newly promoted large domain shouldn't have late-stage constellation realm cultivators. The Thousand Elephant Sea is a place where all kinds of miracles can happen. Lu Yi explained, not long after I was promoted to constellation, I wandered into the Thousand Elephant Sea. I also cultivated my cultivation there. It wasn't nonsense. He did cultivate in the Thousand Elephant Sea, but the method he used couldn't be imitated by others. As for miracles, Wan Xiao could interpret it however she wanted. Chapter 1583. Wan Xiao was visibly moved. A newly ascended large domain had produced a late-stage constellation cultivator in less than 10 years. This was all thanks to the 10,000 elephant sea. Furthermore, his cultivation was not just for show. His strength far exceeded that of a typical late-stage constellation cultivator. What she said to Wu Zhuo earlier was just an excuse. However, after hearing Lu Ye's words, she could not help but have high hopes for the 10,000 elephant sea. Of course, she knew that not every constellation cultivator in the 10,000 elephant sea could be like Lu Yi. That was unrealistic. However, even if not all of them were like that, it was still something worth looking forward to. After pondering for a while, Wan Xiao said, "When cultivator Wu went to Jade Conch, he told me some things about the 10,000 elephant sea. I have some questions. I wonder if cultivator Lu can answer them?" "Please ask." Lu Yi gestured with his hand. Wan Xiao said, "Cultivator Wu said that there are many islands in the 10,000 elephant sea. There are deserted islands and spiritual islands. Cultivators from various galaxies occupy them. I want to ask, based on your experience, if the cultivators of the three realms go to the 10,000 elephant sea, will they be able to establish themselves?" The 10,000 elephant sea was indeed a good place. Even though Wan Xiao did not know much about it, she knew the benefits of going there. However, the more benefits there were, the harder it would be to establish a foothold. This was because the competition would be extremely fierce. If they could not establish a foothold and wander around the 10,000 elephant sea, they would not be able to gain much. Instead, it would be more dangerous. There were too many galaxies in the 10,000 elephant sea. There was no lack of top-notch galaxies. She was not naive enough to think that Jade Conch could be ranked among the top. If she was alone with her late-stage Yu Yao cultivation, she would be able to wander around. No one would be able to bully her. However, she had brought 100 Jade Conch constellations with her this time. She had to consider more. Lu Yi heard her and said, "It should not be a problem to establish a foothold. Cultivator Tang Jun from the Green Dawn Dao world is currently serving as an elder on a spiritual island. He is guarding that spiritual island against invaders. The spiritual island has always been lacking manpower. If the cultivators of the three realms go there, they can make up for it." Wan Xiao heard and looked at Wu Zhuo. Cultivator Wu did not mention this. Wu Zhuo spread his hands. Senior brother Tang did not mention it. The jade slip that Tang Jun had given to Lu Yi didn't mention this matter at all. It only instructed Wu Zhuo to cooperate fully with Lu Yi. As long as he cooperated with Wu Zhuo, he would not mistreat the Green Dawn Dao world's cultivators. As long as they cooperated Wu Zhuo. It was only when Lu Yi mentioned it that Wu Zhuo found out that Tang Jun had actually become a consecrated elder of a spiritual island. He couldn't help but feel excited. Who would have thought that Tang Jun, who hadn't accomplished anything for so many years, would still be able to contribute to his old age? 2. Than before, she to years to herself. To her 999 she. That she 1,002. To her people. She and Tang Jun. Which level? Lu Yi replied. At the very least, before he returned, it was a middle-grade spirit island. Now that a few years had passed, there was a high probability that it had grown into a superior-grade spirit island. As for whether it had grown into a top-grade spirit island, Lu Yi had no way of guessing. He knew what Wan Xiao was concerned about, so he said, "A typical middle-grade spirit island is sufficient to satisfy the daily cultivation needs of cultivators of the constellations." "That's a good thing." Wu Zhuo nodded. Although the number of spiritual jades required for the cultivation of the constellations was not too high, over the years, the number of spiritual jades required would not be small. The amount of spiritual jades saved every year for the cultivation of the 500 constellations was at least a few 100,000. That was not a small amount. Most of the time, cultivators needed to go deep into the galaxy to search for spiritual jades. That would take a lot of time. However, cultivating on a spiritual island in the Wanxiang Sea would save them a lot of time. They could also avoid many potential risks. Of course, this was a good thing. Wan Xiao nodded. Her eyes were full of excitement. She could not wait to see the glory of a middle-level spiritual island in the Wanxiang Sea. She suddenly brought up another matter. 2 years ago, when a cultivator from this realm was traveling through the starry sky, he discovered a bug passage somewhere in this galaxy. According to fellow Taoist Wu, you and fellow Taoist Tang Jun entered the Wanxiang galaxy through this bug passage. I wonder if the bug passage you used to enter the Wanxiang galaxy is related to the one discovered by the cultivator from this realm? Lu Yi asked, "Where is the specific location of the worm passage that the cultivator from your world found?" Wan Xiao took out her star map and marked it, then tossed it to Lu Yi. Lu Yi checked it and nodded. This worm passage is the one that Tang Jun and I accidentally entered. The other end of the worm passage is connected to the Wanxiang galaxy. However, the worm passage has just been formed. I don't know when it will stabilize. Has your world explored it? Wan Xiao shook her head. You said it yourself. The worm passage is not stable yet, so no one dares to barge in. Lu Yi returned the star map. I'll have to trouble your world to send someone to guard the entrance of the worm passage. This is to prevent outsiders from entering our galaxy when the worm passage stabilizes. Moreover, if the worm passage stabilizes one day, we can directly enter the Wanxiang galaxy through it. There's no need to travel. He had originally planned to find an opportunity to discuss this with the people from the Jade Conch boundary. Now that Wan Xiao brought it up, it was exactly what he wanted. Wan Xiao heard him and said, "You're right." She turned to look at Wuxia. "I'll have to trouble you with this. I'll have to trouble you to make another trip to the Jade Conch boundary to clarify the pros and cons. I'll send someone to deal with this." It was no longer convenient for her to return to the Jade Conch boundary, so she could only ask Wuxia to find an opportunity to make another trip. Wuxia agreed without hesitation. This matter concerns our galaxy. I'm duty-bound. After a pleasant discussion, Wan Xiao felt that the time was right. She then looked at Lu Yi and said, "I heard that the journey to the Wanxiang Sea is long. I wonder if you can let me take a look at the route on the star map. That way I'll be prepared." She didn't mention this request at the beginning mainly because she was afraid that Lu Yi would refuse. If Lu Yi wanted to keep it to himself, it would be embarrassing for everyone. If Lu Yi rejected her request now, it wouldn't be a good idea to cooperate. Sure enough, Lu Yi took out the star map without hesitation. He stood up and handed it to Wan Xiao. "This is the star map of the route to the Wanxiang Sea. Along the way you'll have to pass through several dangerous places, 2 galaxies and a worm passage. Fellow Daoist, please check it carefully. During this trip, fellow Daoist strength reigns supreme. We'll have to rely on fellow Daoist strength." Wan Xiao took the star map in a daze. She didn't expect Lu Yi to be so easygoing. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. If that was the case, then why did she arrange for Shi Chuan to suppress Lu Yi? From the looks of it, this Lu Yi of the 9 heavens was quite self-aware. She had a good impression of Lu Yi. After taking the star map and inspecting it, Wan Xiao immediately frowned. "We'll have to pass through the chaotic explosion zone?" She knew that place. It was a very dangerous place. She had been there before. She had accidentally been sucked in by the cosmic magnetic storm and almost died there. At that time she was already Yu Yao. Even Yu Yao couldn't withstand the dangers of that place, let alone the lunar mansions. If the 500 lunar mansions of the 3 realms entered that place and were sucked in by the cosmic magnetic storm, the consequences would be unimaginable. Back then she had intended to pass through the entire chaotic explosion zone. However, after encountering a few dangerous situations, she didn't dare to venture any deeper. Thus, she had no idea what lay beyond the chaotic explosion zone. Only after looking at the star map did she realize that beyond the chaotic explosion zone was the Thousand Hills tomb. After passing through the Thousand Hills tomb, she would have to pass through an unclaimed region of space before arriving at the indefinite galaxy. Logically speaking, the Jade Conch galaxy and the indefinite galaxy weren't too far apart. Both galaxies had cultivators of at least Yu Yao's cultivation base. After so many years they should have crossed paths. However, in reality the Jade Conch galaxy didn't know about the indefinite galaxy, and the indefinite galaxy didn't know about the Jade Conch galaxy. In the end, it was because of the chaotic explosion zone. It could be said that this place was a natural barrier. No cultivator dared to barge in recklessly. "How did you pass through the chaotic explosion zone?" Wan Xiao stared at Lu Yi in disbelief. Logically speaking, it should be impossible for a lunar mansions to pass through such a dangerous place. However, Lu Yi had indeed passed through it. Lu Yi said, "It is indeed a little dangerous. However, if you're careful, it shouldn't be a problem." Wan Xiao shook her head and said, "That place is a land of death. The starry sky magnetic storms are everywhere. They sweep through the entire universe. No one can escape from them once they enter." Wu Zhuo also nodded and said, "I went to that place 600 years ago. However, I was forced to retreat after venturing less than 100,000 kilometers into the chaotic explosion zone. If we cultivators don't have spiritual power to control us, we don't feel safe at all." Lu Yi frowned when he heard this. If he hadn't personally passed through the chaotic explosion zone, he would have thought that Wan Xiao and Wu Zhuo were just trying to scare him. However, these 2 Yu Yao had no reason to scare him over something like this. The chaotic explosion zone was indeed dangerous. However, it wasn't as dangerous as the two of them were making it out to be. Wan Xiao asked, "Is there no other route?" Lu Yi shook his head. "This is the only route that I know of. Perhaps there are others, but I don't know about them." Wan Xiao sighed and looked at Wu Zhuo. "Fellow Taoist Wu, if you want to enter the chaotic explosion zone, I'm afraid you'll have to think about it at length." Wu Zhuo also sighed. Indeed. The two of them seemed to have the intention of backing out. Lu Yi asked, "Fellow Taoist Wu passed through the chaotic explosion zone 600 years ago. What about fellow Taoist Wan?" Wan Xiao replied, "It's been over 500 years. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "Is there a possibility that the chaotic explosion zone isn't as dangerous as it used to be?" Chapter 1584. Wan Xiao and Wu Zhuo explored the explosion zone a few hundred years ago. It was normal for things to change after a few hundred years. Wan Xiao said, "Although fellow martial brother and I explored the chaotic explosion zone a long time ago, there are other cultivators from our two realms who have entered that place one after another. If there were any changes there, we would definitely know. Moreover, a dangerous place like the chaotic explosion zone may have existed for hundreds of thousands of years, millions of years, or even longer. How could it change in a mere few hundred years?" Lu Yi said, "But when I returned, I did not encounter much danger. He was only swept in by the cosmic magnetic storm once and escaped in the end." Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered something. "There is a huge green bird there. Do you two know about it?" Wan Xiao did not understand. What green bird? Wu Zhuo also looked at him blankly. Obviously he had never seen or heard of it before. Lu Yi described the cyan bird, causing Wan Xiao and Wu Zhuo's expressions to turn solemn. There was no doubt that such a gigantic creature was not something they could contend against. The chaotic explosion zone was already dangerous enough, and now with the addition of such a gigantic cyan bird, it was undoubtedly a danger zone. Lu Yi continued, "I don't know where the green bird came from, but it seemed to be very interested in the cosmic magnetic storm. It could swallow the magnetic storm as if it was feeding on it." Hearing this, Wan Xiao's eyes lit up. "Fellow Taoist Lu, you mean to say that because the blue bird swallowed a lot of cosmic magnetic storms, the danger level of the chaotic explosion zone has also decreased?" Lu Yi nodded. "That is possible. If such a terrifying creature swallowed the cosmic magnetic storms, it might change the danger that has accumulated for countless years." Wu Zhuo said, "But even if the explosion zone is not so dangerous, the green bird is not something we can fight against." He now only hoped that such a huge green bird would not come to the Jade Conch galaxy. Such a huge creature could bring a destructive disaster to a region with just a flap of its wings. "Don't worry about the green bird. It does not seem to have any evil intentions. On the way back I even hitched a ride." A ride? Wan Xiao and Wu Zhuo stared at Lu Yi in shock. An unbelievable scene appeared in their minds, but they were not sure if it was really as they imagined. Lu Yi said, "No matter what the Qingli Taoist world and the Yukong world decide, the Jiutian 300 constellations will head to the Wanxiang Sea." Wan Xiao and Wu Zhuo looked at each other and fell silent. After a while Wu Zhuo said, "Don't be anxious, fellow Taoist Lu. Fellow Taoist Wan and I still need to weigh the pros and cons of this matter." Lu Yi nodded. "Then I'll wait for your good news." Lu Yi temporarily stayed in the Divine Martial Palace. It would take at least half a month for the fleet of the 9 prefectures to arrive here, so he was not in a hurry. Time flew by quickly as he tried to deduce spirit runes, refine spirit jades for cultivation, or enter the Cyan Hall to spar with Qing Fu. However, there was no news from Wu Zhuo and Wan Xiao's side. He did not know how their discussion was going. However, just as Lu Yi had said, no matter what the two of them decided, the 9 prefectures fleet would definitely set off for the Wanxiang Sea. There was no turning back. On this particular day, Lu Yi was in the middle of cultivation when the musical note suddenly stirred. After checking it out, he quickly rose to his feet and shot up into the sky. The fleet of the 9 states had arrived at the Qingli Dao world and was waiting outside. Lu Yi rushed over and boarded the leading planetary ship to greet the sect master and the others. The sect master asked, "How's the situation here?" Lu Yi said, "The 2 Yueyao from the Qingli Dao world and the Yukong world have not decided if they want to go together as there is a dangerous place ahead. They are quite worried about it. This was something that should be done. Others were worried because they were responsible enough, so it was not appropriate for them to criticize them." Wu Chang said, "If they don't want to go, we can go on our own. It's not like we have to go with them." Lu Yi said, "Even so, when we reach the Wanxiang Sea, there will be times when we need the Yueyao's help. It would be best if they could go, but if they don't, we can't force them. I'll go back and take a look. After such a long time there should be a result. As he spoke, before Lu Yi could return to the Qingli Dao world, a powerful aura rapidly approached from the distant starry sky. Lu Yi turned his head and felt that the aura was somewhat familiar. He quickly realized that it was Luan Xiao's aura. He immediately realized why Wu Zhuo and Luan Xiao had not responded to him for half a month. Luan Xiao had obviously gone to check the situation in the chaotic explosion zone. Now that Luan Xiao had returned, she must have already checked. As expected of a late-stage Yueyao, her speed was indeed fast. After a while, Luan Xiao's figure appeared in front of the planetary ship. She sized up the 9 prefectures fleet and was secretly surprised. The scale of the 9 prefectures fleet was not bad. There were 10 identical planetary ships, and one could tell that they were of good quality. There were also 5 ferocious-looking warships escorting them. With a sweep of her divine perception, she immediately knew that Lu Yi was right. These constellation mansions were all early-stage constellation mansions. Only Lu Yi was a late-stage constellation mansions. He stood out from the crowd and was extremely outstanding. Taoist Wan. Lu Yi bowed. Luan Xiao nodded slightly. I've been to the chaotic explosion zone. A lot has indeed happened there. It's not as dangerous as before. Time was short, so I couldn't go too deep. I didn't see the green bird you mentioned. Lu Yi said. Then Taoist Wan, you mean? Luan Xiao said. Based on the current situation of the chaotic explosion zone, it shouldn't be too much of a problem to pass through. That's great. Lu Ye's expression lit up. Taoist Wu, please wait for a moment. I need to gather people and inform Taoist Wu Zhuo. As Luan Xiao spoke, she flashed back into the Green Dawn Dao world. After she left, the sect master exhaled slowly. This is Yueyao, right? Luan Xiao from the Jade Conch domain. She's a late-stage Yueyao. Lu Yi explained. Jianghu Hong's expression was cold. Her foundation is profound. She's indeed a lofty mountain. Up until now, the only Yueyao they had seen was Qin Yuan Dai from the Green Dawn Dao world. Unfortunately, that old woman was killed by Lu Ye's red talisman, so they didn't feel Yueyao's true power at all. It was only now that they saw Luan Xiao face to face that they realized the huge gap between them. Lu Yi smiled and said, we'll all have a chance. The 9 states isn't worse than others. It's just that we started a little late. In the future there will be many Yueyao and sunshine. One day the name of the 9 states will resound in the starry sky again. The Wanxiang Sea is just a springboard for us. The group of people felt an inexplicable surge of emotions in their hearts. They couldn't wait to go to the Wanxiang Sea and fight to their heart's content. This time, Lu Yi didn't have to wait too long. In just 1 hour, 6 planetary ships rushed out of the Green Dawn Dao world. However, these 6 planetary ships were different from those of the 9 states. In comparison, the fleet of the 9 states was like a regular army, while the fleet of the Green Dawn Dao world and the Jade Conch domain was like a ragtag army. 6 planetary ships, 3 for each of the 2 realms. Logically speaking, if the 2 realms sent out 100 people each, 1 large planetary ship would be enough. However, in the starry sky, there were times when people couldn't stay too close to each other. Spreading people out could also help to avoid unpredictable dangers. This was also the reason why the 9 states sent out 10 planetary ships. Otherwise, if there were 300 people, 2 planetary ships would be enough. The size of the fleet gathered to 16 planetary ships and 5 battleships. Wu Zhuo came to see them off and gave instructions to the cultivators of his domain. The group of cultivators nodded repeatedly. Lu Yi gave instructions to the cultivators on his side. Then he flew to Luan Xiao's planetary ship and said, Fellow Taoist Luan, you're the most powerful cultivator in this trip. Please lead the team. Cultivators of the 3 realms, listen to your command. The cooperation of the 3 realms needed a leader. Other than Luan Xiao, who was at the late stage of the Munyao realm, there was no other candidate. Lu Yi didn't want to compete with her for anything. Naturally, he had to give her face. After all, if there were any dangers along the way, he would need her help. Luan Xiao was very satisfied with Lu Ye's performance. In fact, in her opinion, Lu Yi had always been very cooperative. It was no doubt easy to cooperate with such a person. There was no need for so much scheming. She immediately nodded and said, Then I won't refuse. However, since you're more familiar with the route, I would like to ask you to assist me. In this way, if I have any doubts, I can ask you at any time. It's my pleasure. Lu Yi nodded and didn't refuse. He took out a sound talisman and sent out a message, asking the fleet of the 9 states to listen to Yuan Xiao's command. Everything was ready. The fleet was ready to set off. Following Yuan Xiao's command, her planetary ship was the first to sweep into the depths of the starry sky. Then the other 15 planetary ships followed after a certain distance. The 5 Tiger Shark warships patrolled the starry sky on both sides. On the planetary ship, Yuan Xiao scanned the surroundings with her divine will. She was slightly surprised because she found that the overall coordination of the cultivators of the realm of 9 heavens was much better than that of the Jade Conch realm and the Greenly Taoist realm. She didn't give any extra instructions, and the planetary ships of the realm of 9 heavens had already been arranged in the most reasonable way. Each planetary ship was closely connected to the other planetary ships, and it was quite simple. She was curious. How did the cultivators of this newly promoted large domain grow? They seemed to be a little different from the Jade Conch realm and the Qingli Dao realm. Outside the Qingli Dao realm, Wuxia watched as the fleet sailed into the starry sky and disappeared. Beside him, there were many cultivators from the Qingli Dao realm who looked on with envy. This time the Qingli Dao realm only sent 100 people to the Wanxiang Sea. Too many people didn't get selected and were naturally disappointed. Wuxia knew what they were thinking. He reprimanded them. No matter where you are, as a cultivator, working hard to cultivate is the right way. Instead of envying others, you should focus on your own. If everything goes well, this is just the beginning. There will be many more opportunities in the future. A group of cultivators from the Qingli Dao realm agreed. Wuxia said, I'll go to the Jade Conch realm. You guys take good care of the domain. The matter of the insect path had to be handled by the Jade Conch realm. They had to send Yu Yao to guard there. If the insect path really stabilized one day, the galaxy would be officially connected to the Wanxiang Sea. Then the galaxy would take off. Chapter 1585. The fleet set off from the Qingli Taoist world. Although they were not slow, it would still take them 2 months to reach the chaotic explosion area. Lu Yi stayed on Yuan Xiao's starship so that he could be summoned at any time. However, there was nothing for him to do at the moment. The fleet only needed to move forward according to the route on the star map, so he spent most of his time doing his own things in his cabin. Most of the star beasts they encountered were hunted down by the Jianghu cultivators on the Tiger Shark warships. They could not get close to the fleet at all. Although most of the star beasts had low spiritual intelligence, many of them had the instinct to seek advantages and avoid disadvantages. Such a fleet was not to be trifled with. Naturally, not many star beasts dared to provoke them. Those who dared to provoke the fleet were simple-minded and full of brute force. In the Green Hall, Lu Yi held the Panshan saber and the soul-severing saber. He crossed the 2 sabers and kept fighting with Qing Fu. After such a long fight, he felt that he had studied Qing Fu's dual saber technique very thoroughly. Although he did not use the sabers as smoothly as Qing Fu, he had at least learned 70 to 80% of the technique. He slowly discovered a pattern, which was that the legacies in Qing Fu were all things that consumed a lot of one's foundation. Qing Li's bearing of her fangs was not too obvious. It was an explosive saber technique. If she wanted to use it, she would have to unleash part of her strength in a very short time. Otherwise, it would not have the corresponding power and would just be a figurehead. Yan Shi's attack was needless to say. Every time it attacked, it put a lot of burden on the body and spiritual power. Even with Lu Ye's foundation, he could not maintain it for too long. Qing Fu's dual saber technique was the most obvious. Because once this technique was performed, each saber was heavier and faster than the previous one. In the end, the power of each saber was far more powerful than usual. At this moment, the saber in Qing Fu's hand was almost invisible. It had become a continuous saber shadow. However, Lu Yi was able to block them perfectly. He could clearly feel the terrifying power contained in each of the green mantis slashes. He secretly felt that he was about to pass the test of the green mantis slashes. He wondered what the next legacies would be like. Just as he was thinking this, Grasshopper's swift movements suddenly paused. Lu Yi was surprised to find that Grasshopper was holding the long saber in her left hand in a strange posture. His heart skipped a beat as he faintly felt that something was wrong. Ever since he had fought against Qing Fu, he had never made such a strange move. If it was a battle of life and death, Lu Yi would never give Qing Fu any chance. At this moment he would definitely rush over. However, this was an inheritance after all. Therefore, even though Lu Yi knew that Qing Fu was going to do something, he could only wait and see. As expected, Qing Fu's aura became even sharper as she held the 2 long blades in a reverse grip. The 2 long blades suddenly emitted a dazzling light. Her body started to spin, and the 2 long blades started to spin as well. A deep voice came out of the green mantis's mouth. Big, wind, chariot. Then Lu Yi saw a storm of blades engulfing the entire green hall. 3 breaths later, Lu Yi, who had used all his strength to defend himself, grunted as he was sent flying out of the green hall. He slowly opened his eyes in his cabin, feeling a slight stabbing pain in his head. Lu Yi silently took out a stalk of spirit-refining grass and began to refine it. He thought back to the scene just now. After a long time he muttered, "Shameless. How could he defend against such a move?" The green hall was only so big. Even if he used the infernal breath, he wouldn't be able to dodge the chariot's attack. He originally thought that he was about to pass Grasshopper's test and obtain the essence of her saber technique inheritance. Now it seemed that he had been too naive. After thinking it over, he concluded that with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to block such a terrifying and violent storm of blades unless he could also use such a saber technique and give her a taste of her own medicine. However, this wind chariot was indeed terrifying. If he could really comprehend it and use it when surrounded in the future, all of his enemies would suffer. Lu Yi was in no hurry to enter the green hall as he thought about the details of Grasshopper's saber technique. Suddenly, a violent fluctuation of spiritual power came from outside. It wasn't caused by a constellation realm cultivator. It was clearly caused by Yu Yao. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly rushed out of his cabin and arrived on the deck. He saw that many cultivators from the Jade Conch realm had gathered there. Shi Chuan, who he had defeated, was among them. These cultivators from the Jade Conch realm were all standing at the side of the ship, looking in a certain direction. The fleet had already stopped, and all of the cultivators from the 3 realms were looking in that direction. Lu Yi followed their gazes and saw that there was indeed an intense battle. On one side was Luan Xiao, and on the other side was a ferocious-looking star beast. At first glance, the star beast looked like a giant lizard. However, its body was covered in sharp barbs, its claws were extremely sharp, and its tail was long and nimble. Its most terrifying weapon was the long tongue that popped out of its mouth. It flickered back and forth, sweeping towards the west. The star beast's aura was at the late-stage Yu Yao realm, which was on par with Luan Xiao. At this moment, the 2 sides were locked in a fierce battle. Only now did Lu Yi know that Luan Xiao was also a weapon cultivator. Although he had guessed it when he saw her attire, he couldn't confirm it until he saw it with his own eyes. Luan Xiao used a long spear that glowed with silver light. With the spear in her hand, she looked extremely valiant. "Brother Lu, you've come?" Shi Chuan hurriedly greeted Lu Yi when he saw him. Although he had been defeated by Lu Yi in 3 strikes, Shi Chuan didn't hold a grudge against him. Instead, he was able to quickly adjust his state of mind. It was clear that he had a good temperament. Besides Shi Chuan, a group of Jade Conch cultivators also greeted him. During this period of time, Lu Yi would occasionally come out for a walk, so he had become familiar with many people. "What's going on?" Lu Yi asked. Shi Chuan said, "There's a star beast blocking our way. It's very powerful, so we can only rely on Martial Ant Luan." Lu Yi nodded slightly. After observing for a while, he realized that the star beast was indeed powerful, but it was no match for Luan Xiao. Under the premise of the same level of cultivation, the star beast's strength was basically inferior to that of a cultivator. This was because the star beast's battle relied entirely on instinct and didn't have as many tricks as a cultivator. For example, this lizard-like star beast attacked back and forth. It was nothing more than flicking its long tongue, pouncing its body and shooting its back thorns. With Luan Xiao's current strength, she should be able to take it down without much effort. However, the battle between the human and the beast was extremely fierce. Luan Xiao was trying to establish her prestige. The cultivators of the 3 realms were working together. Other than the cultivators of the Jade Conch world who worshipped her from the bottom of their hearts, the people of the 9 states in the Qingli Dao world felt a sense of distance. After all, they didn't come from the same world. Luan Xiao intended to let the cultivators of the 9 states in the Qingli Dao world see her abilities and let everyone know her strength. That was why she was fighting so ostentatiously. Luan Xiao understood but didn't say it out loud. Luan Xiao's actions were reasonable. If Lu Yi was in her position, he would have done the same. As expected, many cultivators from the 3 realms were watching this earth-shattering battle on the starships. All of them were mesmerized by it, especially the cultivators of the 9 states who had never seen Yu Yao in action. All of them yearned and longed for her. After a while, Luan Xiao's long spear pierced through the head of the lizard-like star beast. She put away her long spear and flew back with the corpse of the star beast in her hand. The fleet continued on their journey. Luan Xiao saw Lu Yi who had come out of seclusion and called out, "Taoist Lu, follow me." The corpse of the star beast was thrown on the deck for the cultivators of the Jade Conch world to deal with. It was worth spiritual jades if they brought it to the Wanxiang Sea. As Luan Xiao walked into the center of the star ship, a star map appeared in front of them like a projection. Luan Xiao pointed at the star map and said, "According to our current speed, we will enter the chaotic explosion zone in 1 day. Taoist Lu, you came here through the chaotic explosion zone. However, you were alone at that time. It's not as convenient for the fleet to move forward now. Although I've found that the situation in the chaotic explosion zone has changed greatly, it's impossible for the galactic magnetic storms to disappear completely. Therefore we still have to be prepared." Lu Yi nodded. He knew that Luan Xiao was right. Even if the green birds devouring had reduced the galactic magnetic storms in this area and reduced the danger, they still had to be prepared. When he was alone he was agile. However, when the fleet was moving forward he had to consider more things. "Taoist Lu, do you have any good arrangements?" Luan Xiao asked. She had called Lu Yi over to discuss the matter of passing through the chaotic explosion zone with him. Since Lu Yi had handed over the decision-making power to her, it was equivalent to putting the lives of 300 cultivators in her hands. She knew that she had a heavy responsibility. If they could cooperate successfully for the first time, the relationship between the three realms would definitely become closer. However, if something went wrong during this cooperation, they would lose the trust between each other, and it would be difficult for them to cooperate again in the future. Therefore she couldn't act arbitrarily. This was also the reason why she had left Lu Yi on the star ship. Lu Yi thought for a moment and said, "The galactic magnetic storms cover a large area, and their speed is extremely fast. Even a star ship can't compare to them. Therefore, if we want to pass through the chaotic explosion zone, it's best to search for places where we can take shelter at any time along the way, such as large meteorites, desolate stars, or dead stars. In this way, if we encounter a galactic magnetic storm, we can avoid it in advance and wait for it to leave." Luan Xiao said calmly, "Go on. In addition, we also need someone to monitor the surroundings and check if there are any signs of galactic magnetic storms." How could Lu Yi not know what Luan Xiao meant? He directly said, "Let the 9 heavens tiger shark warships spread out. One of them will explore the path ahead and look for a suitable place to take shelter. The other warships will be divided into 2 groups. They will keep a certain distance from each other. If there are any abnormalities they can report to me at any time." Luan Xiao probably had the same idea. However, the tiger shark warships belong to the 9 provinces after all. It would be inappropriate for her to give the command directly. However, if Lu Yi gave the command there would be no such concerns. Chapter 1586. Fellow Taoist Lu is wise. Luan Xiao thought the same, but she did not show it on her face. "Then let's do as you say." She guessed that Lu Yi had sent out 5 tiger shark warships for the same reason. Otherwise, the number would not be so coincidental. "But I have a suggestion," Luan Xiao said again. "Please tell me." Under such an arrangement, the cultivators who control the tiger sharks will face a greater risk, so it's not good for the 9 heavens realm to bear it alone. Why not let the cultivators of the 3 realms send out some people? Each warship will have 1 cultivator from each realm. Lu Yi thought about it and nodded, "Okay." Under such an arrangement, the cultivators in the tiger shark warships would indeed bear a greater risk because they were separated from the fleet. Moreover, the cultivators of the 9 states were all in the early stage of the constellation. If the cultivators of the Jade Conch realm and the Green Dawn realm were also in the tiger shark warships, their ability to protect themselves and sense danger would be stronger. After the 2 finished their discussion, they immediately made the arrangements. Soon the 5 tiger shark warships were adjusted. There were 3 cultivators in each warship, 1 from each realm. The cultivators of the 9 states were all in the early stage of the constellation, while the cultivators of the Jade Conch realm and the Green Dawn realm were all in the late stage. According to the previous plan, the 5 warships were separated and kept a certain distance from the fleet to ensure that they could communicate with each other. At the same time, if there was any danger, the fleet could provide support at any time. A day later, the fleet entered the explosion zone. Even though she had personally checked it once before, Luan Xiao still came to the deck and stood still. She looked into the distance, and her powerful divine thoughts came back and forth. She was secretly surprised. What kind of existence was the giant green bird that Lu Yi mentioned before? When she came here hundreds of years ago, this place was chaotic and there were countless magnetic storms. How could it be so calm now? She was also faintly worried. Although the explosion zone was extremely dangerous, it was actually a natural barrier of the Jade Conch Galaxy. Such barriers were everywhere in the Jade Conch Galaxy. Some were starry wonders and some were dangerous places like the Explosion Zone. These barriers isolated the Jade Conch Galaxy from this area of the starry sky. While limiting the Jade Conch Galaxy, they also protected it. Now that the barrier of the chaotic explosion zone was showing signs of failing, he wondered if it would bring any unpredictable dangers to the Jade Conch Galaxy. But there was no point in thinking about this now. Some things could not be avoided, so they could only face them head-on. If there was a day when sunshine was born in this galaxy, it would be able to deal with most dangers. As for the Jade Conch world, its desire for sunlight was the strongest in the three realms. Lu Yi was surprised to find that the environment in the chaotic explosion zone was much more peaceful than the last time he came back. The last time he came back, he often encountered stellar magnetic storms, but this time the chances of encountering them were much lower. From the looks of it, it was all thanks to the giant green bird. Lu Yi wanted to look for the green bird and see if he could hitch a ride to save time, but after entering the explosion zone for a long time, there was no sign of the green bird. He did not know if it was in the Thousand Hills grave. That fellow seemed to sleep after eating in the Thousand Hills grave. Moreover, the chaotic explosion zone was so big. Even if the green bird was here, it would only chase after stellar magnetic storms. If not for their good luck, it would be very difficult for them to encounter each other. Thanks to all the previous arrangements, the fleet would occasionally encounter stellar magnetic storms in the chaotic explosion zone. The patrolling Tiger Shark warships would monitor them in advance and find a suitable place to hide in time. They did not encounter much danger in the few months they had been traveling. In such an environment, there was not much Lu Yi could do. Other than cultivating, he could deduce spirit runes. Because these two things could be interrupted at any time, there was no hindrance. It had been a while since he reached the late stage of the constellation realm. When he first advanced, he even deliberately suppressed his cultivation speed to prevent his foundation from being unstable. Later on, even when he started cultivating, he only refined things like spirit jades. Therefore, although his efficiency was much faster than ordinary cultivators, it was far inferior to when he cultivated in the Wanxiang Sea. The only good thing was that the fuel consumption of the talent tree was not so terrifying. Now, the fuel consumption of the talent tree was basically used to deduce spirit runes. At this rate of accumulation, no matter how efficient he was, it would take at least 10 years to cultivate from the late stage of the constellation realm to the peak state. However, he was not in a hurry to break through the current realm. This was because when he left the reincarnation tree, Elder Shu had told him that it was best to make a trip to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone before he advanced to Yuyao. As for why, Elder Shu did not say. However, since Elder Shu had specially instructed him, there must be a benefit. Lu Yi was prepared to go to the Wanxiang Sea. After settling everything, he would raise his cultivation to the limit as soon as possible and then head to the Yin-Yang Great Millstone. In addition, he also had to send Li Shang back to the Soul Clan's ancestral land. If he let her go back alone, Lu Yi was a little worried. After all, the Immortal Essence Guards were still in the Myriad Soul banner. If anything happened to Li Shang, they would be wiped out. While he was cultivating, a sound suddenly came. Lu Yi hurriedly checked and found that it was a warning that had been passed down since ancient times. Wangu Lu was the head of the official department in Haotian City of the War Province. Although he didn't have much contact with Lu Yi, they had seen each other a few times. When Lu Yi was promoted in Haotian City, he had seen Wangu Lu. In this chaotic explosion zone, the only way to send a warning was to discover a starry sky magnetic storm. As soon as he received the message, Lu Yi did not hesitate at all. He immediately flashed out and came to the deck. At the same time, his hands moved quickly, sending out a message with the help of the sound. At the same time, Wan Xiaoa also received the warning and made the same arrangements. The next moment, the whole fleet turned around and rushed in a direction. In that direction, there was a desolate star that the warships in front had observed in advance. It was a good place to hide. Over the past few months, everyone had experienced such a scene several times, so they were familiar with it. After a while, the fleet entered the desolate star. They each looked for a suitable position, put away their star boats, and waited for the starry sky magnetic storm to sweep over. The Tiger Shark warships that were patrolling outside returned one after another. Lu Yi looked in a certain direction. That direction was where Wang Guliu's Tiger Shark warships were patrolling. No matter which Tiger Shark warship sent the warning, the danger in that direction was the greatest. The Tiger Shark warships that sent the warning had returned safely, but this time there seemed to be some accident. Lu Yi saw the terrifying scene of the starry sky magnetic storm sweeping over, but he still did not see the tiger shark warships. Everyone's expression became serious. They knew that something bad was going to happen. Such a scene undoubtedly meant that the tiger shark warship that sent the warning had been swept into the starry sky magnetic storm. Otherwise it would not have appeared until now. The cultivators of the three realms all looked sad. After all, each tiger shark warship had a cultivator of their own realm. Wan Xiao stood beside Lu Yi and could not help but sigh. If it were any other danger, with her foundation as a late-stage Yu Yao, she could think of a way to save them. However, even she could not do anything about the starry sky magnetic storm. Rashly rushing in would be like throwing meat buns to dogs. Just as she was secretly praying that the three-star mansions would be blessed by the heavens, Lu Yi suddenly rushed out, leaving only one sentence echoing in her ears. "I'll go take a look." Wan Xiao was stunned. By the time she reacted, it was already too late to stop him. She could only watch as Lu Yi rushed into the starry sky magnetic storm. She was very anxious, but when she turned her head, she saw Yi looking in the direction Lu Yi had left with a calm expression. "Little girl, aren't you worried?" Wan Xiao knew Yi. During this period, Yi often came to find Lu Yi, so she knew that Yi and Lu Yi had a very deep relationship. "I'm worried," Yi replied honestly. Then she changed the topic. "But if it's Lu Yi, he should be fine." She already knew from Li Shang that Lu Yi was confident in dealing with the starry sky magnetic storm, so she was not too worried. Moreover, Yaya was by her side. If there was really any danger, she could ask Yaya to help. Wan Xiao looked at Yi in confusion. She had no idea where Yi's confidence came from. This was a starry sky magnetic storm. Even if she, Yu Yao, rushed into it, she would not have a good ending, let alone Lu Yi. Lu Ye's figure had already disappeared. The starry sky magnetic storm seemed to be much more violent than the previous ones. Looking from afar, it looked like a tornado that swept across the vast starry sky. Not only did the tornado contain a force field that could restrain the power of cultivators, it also swept up a lot of debris in the starry sky and spun at high speed. Rushing into this huge tornado, Lu Ye's figure could not help but drift along with the waves. Soon he became dizzy. With the innate skill tree, he was not afraid of the invisible force field suppression on his body. However, it was extremely difficult to find a tiger shark warship in such an environment. He was certain that the tiger shark warship was definitely swept up because when Lu Yi contacted the ancient flow, he did not receive any reply. After pondering for a moment, Lu Yi forcibly urged his spiritual power and moved in the opposite direction of the starry sky magnetic storm. He thought that the tiger shark warship would definitely not be able to withstand the magnetic storm's sweep. At this moment, it would definitely be swept along by the magnetic storm. If he did the same, then everyone would always be spinning in the same direction, and the probability of encountering each other was not high. However, if he moved in the opposite direction, the probability of encountering each other would be much higher. As long as he could find the tiger shark warship, the rest would be simple. But soon, Lu Ye's method did not work because when he moved in the opposite direction, the meteorites swept up by the magnetic storm could not be avoided at all. The large and small meteorites slammed into him, causing his body to shake violently. His blood and qi surged. After a while, he felt that he could not hold on any longer. Chapter 1587. With the support of the innate skill tree, his spirit qi could circulate freely in his body, but if he continued to drift along like this, it would be impossible to find the tiger shark battleship because everyone was spinning in the same direction at the same speed. If he wanted to find the tiger shark battleship, he would have to increase his speed, surpassing the speed of the magnetic storm. Thinking of this, Lu Yi madly urged his spirit qi and rushed forward in the direction of the magnetic storm. Looking from a distance, the starry sky magnetic storm was like a huge tornado that covered a large area of the starry sky. Lu Yi could not determine the exact location of the tiger shark battleship at this moment, and his divine sense was in a mess in this place, so even his vision was extremely limited. Lu Yi could only use the most stupid method, which was to spiral along the direction of the tornado and search step by step. This time he did not have to worry about running into any meteorites because from Lu Ye's point of view, he was chasing after meteorites rotating at high speed, so as long as he was careful, there would not be any problems. The tornado-like starry sky magnetic storm was wide at the top and narrow at the bottom. Lu Yi constantly expanded his search range, but he found nothing. He was secretly anxious. Although the quality of the tiger shark battleship was good, it could not withstand being tossed around in this place for a long time. Losing a tiger shark battleship was not a big deal, but without the protection of the tiger shark battleship, the three cultivators would most likely die. After half an hour, 2 hours, almost 4 hours of searching, Lu Yi himself was dizzy from all the spinning and did not know how far the starry sky magnetic storm had swept him. Just when Yang Kai thought that Wangu Lu and the others were most likely going to die, his eyes suddenly narrowed as he turned to look in a certain direction. Amidst the starry sky debris, a familiar object flashed past. Lu Yi quickly pulled himself together and rushed in that direction. When he got close, he saw a tattered tiger shark battleship. The battleship originally had a good defensive array, which should have been enough to resist the impact of the debris in the starry sky, but in this starry sky magnetic storm, even the spirit chi in a cultivator's body was sealed, not to mention the tiger shark battleship's defensive array. The array could not be activated at all. At this moment, the warship, which was worth 500,000 spirit jades, was in shambles. It was full of holes and the entire warship was full of holes. Lu Yi hurriedly came to the side of the tiger shark battleship and sensed it at close range. He immediately felt relieved. He was still alive. It seemed like the tiger shark battleship had provided them with a certain level of protection. Otherwise, if their physical bodies were swept in, there would be no way for them to survive. Although the 3 people inside were still alive, their condition was obviously not good. Lu Yi stuck close to the tiger shark battleship and peeked through a fist-sized hole, only to see that the 3 people inside had all fallen unconscious. There was also the smell of blood coming from inside the ship. Obviously, everyone had suffered heavy injuries. Without spiritual power to control, the only thing a cultivator could rely on was their own physical body. None of the 3 cultivators arranged on this battleship were body cultivators. As the battleship continued to roll and crash, their condition was not very good. Lu Yi stuck himself to the broken warship, looked around, then climbed to the keel of the warship, grabbed it and tried to escape with the warship. However, while it was easy for him to enter alone, it was difficult for him to bring a battleship with him. After giving it a try, Lu Yi discovered that it was almost impossible. With a thought, the dragon throne appeared. A round ball the size of a baby's head collapsed, and dragon scales covered Lu Ye's body. In the blink of an eye, a 10-meter-tall scarlet figure appeared beside the battleship. Lu Yi felt as if there were invisible needles stabbing into his body, and his foundation was quickly devoured by the dragon throne. He grabbed the keel of the warship and used all his strength to rush in a certain direction. The resistance was great, and meteorites of various sizes slammed into the dragon throne. Lu Yi was not seriously injured, but the warship in his hand was battered even more. If he was alone, he could force his way out like this, but not only did he have to go out by himself, but he also had to ensure the safety of the 3 people inside the warship. Lu Yi suspected that the warship would be completely destroyed before he could escape with it. If that was the case, the 3 unconscious people inside would definitely die. It was impossible to force his way out like this. He had to follow the direction of the magnetic storm. Lu Yi immediately changed his course of action. He continued to move rapidly in the direction of the magnetic storm, his speed increasing. This time, however, he did not spiral upwards. Instead, he continued to spin in a certain direction. At a certain point, when his speed reached a certain level, Lu Yi felt himself and the warship being thrown out of the magnetic storm without much effort. The invisible force field that had been lingering around him disappeared, along with the force of the magnetic storm. When Lu Yi looked back, he saw the giant tornado quickly disappearing into the distance. He could not help but let out a long sigh. Dragging the battered warship, he flew forward for a while before coming to a stop. He put away the dragon throne, opened the hatch and walked into the warship. The smell of blood inside was very strong. 3 cultivators from different realms were lying around in various strange postures. Lu Yi hurriedly went forward to investigate. The 3 of them were not dead, but their injuries were quite serious. It seemed that they would need some time to recover. Lu Yi fed the 3 of them recovery pills before beginning to investigate the warship's situation. The situation was not very good. Most of the warship's functions had failed. After all, it was very difficult to maintain its original functions in such a damaged state. Fortunately, the warship could still be piloted. It was just that its speed could not be increased. Lu Yi guessed that it had something to do with some of the spell formations being destroyed. He did not know much about spell formations, so he did not know how to repair them. Now that he had rescued the people, what he needed to do was to hurry up and meet up with the fleet. He checked the sound talismans and tried to send a message, but the message could not be transmitted. There was only one possibility for this situation, and that was that they were too far away from each other, beyond the range of the sound talismans. The magnetic storm was very fast. He had been stuck in there for more than 4 hours. After being swept away for such a long time, he was definitely very far away from the fleet. Lu Yi did not discover anything special after identifying the surrounding space. Although he had the star map route given to him by the reincarnation tree, it was only a route. It did not include the detailed situation of the chaotic explosion zone. He could identify the stars near the route, but he could not identify the stars beyond the range. Thus he did not know where he was. He could only advance in the opposite direction of the magnetic storm and hope to encounter the fleet again. The tattered tiger shark warship could not be used anymore. It was too slow. Lu Yi wanted to put it away. After all, it was worth 500,000 spirit jades. It should still be usable after being repaired in the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Unexpectedly, the warship was damaged by some unknown spell formation and could not shrink. Although the tiger shark warship was a small warship, it was not something that could be stored in a storage ring. Lu Yi had no choice but to give up. He summoned his star boat, carried the 3 unconscious people onto it, and drove the star boat forward. Fortunately, there were only 3 people. Otherwise, his star boat would not be able to hold them. He thought that if he continued forward, he would encounter a fleet that would search for him. However, he did not expect that after traveling for several days, he still did not see any living beings. Lu Yi knew that the fleet would not give up on him. They would definitely send people to search for him. There was only one reason why he did not encounter them. They were going in the wrong direction. The direction of the starry sky was 3-dimensional, and there was no blind spot in the radiation. Therefore, there were often situations where the slightest deviation could lead to a huge deviation. Lu Yi estimated that he might have missed the direction that the fleet was searching for him. However, he did not panic. If the fleet could not find him, they would continue to move forward. Therefore, as long as he found the correct route and continued forward, he would definitely meet the fleet. Thinking of this, Lu Yi steered the star boat to observe the stars around him to ensure that he returned to the correct route as soon as possible. At the same time, he asked Wangu Lu and the others to keep communicating with each other to see if they could contact the fleet. Wangu Lu and the other 2 people woke up one after another. When they woke up and found that they were still alive, they were all pleasantly surprised. At that time, the 3 of them were already prepared to die. When they were caught in the starry sky magnetic storm, even Wan Xiao could not save them. However, when they woke up, they saw Lu Yi. Wangu Lu was one of them, so there was nothing to say. However, the 2 late-stage constellation cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and the Jade Conch Dao world expressed their sincere gratitude to Lu Yi. This was a life-saving grace, and many cultivators valued this very much. After learning about the current situation, the 3 of them did not dare to be negligent. While healing their injuries, they kept trying to contact the outside world, trying to get in touch with the fleet. Unfortunately, they did not get anything. At the same time, where the fleet was located, the cultivators of the 3 realms had a disagreement for the first time. It was mainly the disagreement between the cultivators of the 9 regions and Wan Xiao. The fleet had been searching in this chaotic explosion area for several days, but they had not found the whereabouts of Lu Yi and the other 3 people. There was not even a reply to their messages. The cultivators of the 9 regions naturally insisted on continuing the search, because they would not give up on Lu Yi no matter what. They also felt that Lu Yi could not have met with any accident. Now that they had not found him, it was only because they were searching in the wrong direction. Therefore, as long as they expanded the search area, they would definitely gain something. However, Wan Xiao did not agree. It was not that she did not care about Lu Yi's life or death. This time, the cultivators of the 3 realms joined forces to enter the Wanxiang Sea, and it was Lu Yi who facilitated it. He was the one who provided the star chart, and there were many things that she needed his help with in the future. Moreover, Lu Yi went to save people, not only the cultivators of the 9 regions, but also the cultivators of the Jade Conch Dao world. In the face of such a terrifying starry sky magnetic storm, he still rushed in without hesitation. Who would not be moved by such a magnificent feat? If possible, Wan Xiao also wanted to find Lu Yi before setting off. However, as the leader of this fleet, she had a lot of things to consider. After several considerations, she could only decide to continue the fleet's journey. Thus, the disagreement broke out. Chapter 1588. In the past, if a group of early-stage star mansions dared to be so arrogant in front of Wan Xiao would have taught them a lesson about the difference in strength between them. If Yu Yao wanted to use force, how could the early-stage star mansions resist? However, they were cultivators from the 9 provinces after all. How could Wan Xiao use force? She could only persuade them patiently. On a planetary ship in the 9 provinces, Wan Xiao arrived personally. She looked at the star mansions in front of her and said slowly, You should be the closest people to fellow Taoist Lu. I can understand your feelings, but I just want to ask, do you think fellow Taoist Lu will meet with any accident under such circumstances? Yi immediately said, no. She was beside Lu Yi when he rushed out. At that time, Wan Xiao was curious why she wasn't worried at all and even asked her about it. Wan Xiao observed their expressions and realized that none of the star mansions in front of her seemed to be worried. They were clearly very sure that Lu Yi wouldn't meet with any accident because of the galactic magnetic storm. She didn't know the reason, so she could only wonder why these people had such strong confidence in Lu Yi. She nodded slightly and said, since everyone feels that fellow Taoist Lu won't meet with any accident, why do you insist on continuing the search? Tang Yifeng said, we have to find him eventually. We can't leave him here alone. It's too pitiful for a child to be left here alone. Wan Xiao looked over. If there are no accidents, fellow Taoist Lu must be looking for the fleet right now. However, he hasn't contacted us, so it's very likely that we're searching in the wrong direction. Once there's a mistake in the direction of the starry sky, it'll be very difficult to find each other. Since you know fellow Taoist Lu, what decision will he make if he notices this? Tang Yifeng and the others all looked pensive. Li Baxin said, if it's junior brother, he should continue on his way and wait for us in front. This was the answer Wan Xiao wanted. She immediately nodded. I think so too. This should be the wisest and safest way. So we just need to set off according to plan. Maybe we'll meet fellow Taoist Lu in front as we walk. I've looked at the star map. In another month, we'll be able to leave the chaotic explosion zone and arrive at the Thousand Hills tomb. Rather than searching aimlessly here, why don't we go to the Thousand Hills tomb and take a look? The hierarch and the others silently pondered. Although they didn't want to admit it, they had to admit that what Wan Xiao said was very likely to happen. Lu Yi wasn't a stubborn person. If he really couldn't find any trace of the fleet, he would definitely think of some other way. Continuing on the road was the best choice. Wan Xiao continued, also, everyone, this is the chaotic explosion zone. It's not a place where we can stay for long. Since fellow Taoist Lu has given me the authority to lead this cooperation, I have to take responsibility for the cultivators of the three realms. If we continue to search here, it'll only increase the risk. If fellow Taoist Lu is safe and sound and is waiting for us in the Thousand Hills tomb, how am I supposed to explain this to fellow Taoist Lu? Seeing that the people in front of her were showing signs of being persuaded, she struck while the iron was hot and said, everyone, don't worry. When we reach the Thousand Hills tomb, if fellow Taoist Lu isn't there, the fleet will wait for half a month. If fellow Taoist Lu doesn't appear, I'll personally come back to find him. I'll definitely give everyone an explanation. This was the greatest sincerity that Wan Xiao could express. If the 9 states were still unwilling to cooperate, then they could only go their separate ways. The hierarch looked at the people around him, momentarily unable to make a decision. At the critical moment, Wuxia stepped forward and said softly, let's continue on our way. If it's Lu Yi, he won't die. In the past, they could still determine Lu Yi's safety through Hu Po's life. However, after returning, Lu Yi had removed the life origin technique, so this method wouldn't work anymore. However, they weren't worried about Lu Yi's safety. When he dared to charge out in that situation, he must have been confident. It was just that they didn't know where he had been swept away by the cosmic magnetic storm. After Wuxia expressed her opinion, the hierarch nodded. Then we'll follow fellow Taoist Luan's arrangements. After a short while, the fleet continued onward along the route marked on the star map. On the 9-state starship, Yi squatted beside Hu Po and poked Yaya's chubby cheeks with her finger. Don't keep sleeping. Your father is missing. Hurry up and find him. Yaya was drooling from her sleep. After being poked by Yi, she switched positions and fell into a deep sleep in Hu Po's arms. You're so unreliable. Yi was furious. She wanted nothing more than to lift Yaya up and smack her butt. However, she didn't dare to do so when she thought about how this was sunshine. The starship transformed into a streak of light as it shot through the starry sky. Lu Yi stood at the bow of the ship and held a star map in his hand. After a short while, his expression lit up as he had finally found the correct route. Things were much easier now that he had found the correct route. As long as he followed the route, he would be able to leave the chaotic explosion zone and enter the Thousand Mound tomb. After carefully identifying the route for a while, he adjusted his direction slightly and the starship sped forward at an even faster speed than before. After several days of recuperation, Wangu Lu and the others had more or less fully recovered from their injuries. Unfortunately, no matter how hard they tried, they still couldn't establish contact with the fleet. Yeah, how long will it take to leave this area? Wangu Lu asked. Lu Yi replied, according to the mark on the star map, it will take about 20 days. Wangu Lu and the others relaxed. 20 days wasn't too long. After being swept into the galactic magnetic storm, the three of them were traumatized by this area. They just wanted to leave as soon as possible. Until now, the three of them still didn't know how Lu Yi had saved them. It was simply impossible to save someone under such circumstances. They prayed in their hearts that they wouldn't encounter another galactic magnetic storm. They were traveling alone now, and it wasn't as convenient as the fleet. There was also no one to patrol and warn them. If they encountered another galactic magnetic storm, they might suffer again if they couldn't find a place to hide in time. Fortunately, they didn't encounter any accidents along the way. A few days later, while Lu Yi was driving the star boat, he heard the star constellation called Zhou Xingji from the Green Dawn Dao realm exclaim, "What's that?" Everyone on the ship felt their hearts skip a beat. It was not a good sign to discover something abnormal in this place. They quickly looked in the direction he was pointing and saw that there was a stream of light in that direction. It was like a ribbon that stretched across the starry sky. The ribbon was slowly spreading in one direction as if it had a life of its own. The end of the ribbon was slowly dissipating, but because the front was still spreading, the ribbon maintained a very long span. Lu Yi used his eyesight to see clearly what was at the front of the ribbon. It was a huge butterfly. The butterfly was multicolored and extremely beautiful. At a glance, it looked like the most exquisite piece of art. With a gentle flap of its wings, it could travel tens of thousands of kilometers. The ribbons visible to the naked eye were actually the dust that scattered when it flapped its wings. A star beast. Another cultivator from the Jade Conch realm called Tao Yen also saw the butterfly and couldn't help but exclaim, "Brother Tao, do you know what kind of star beast this is?" Lu Yi asked. Tao Yen shook his head and said, "I haven't seen it before." It was not surprising. There were all kinds of star beasts in the starry sky. Not to mention Tao Yen, who was just a star constellation, even Ri dared not say that he was omniscient. Zhou Xingji also said that he didn't know what the star beast was. Needless to say, Wanguliu was the least knowledgeable one in the starry sky. The butterfly star beast was 1,000,000 kilometers away, so the few of them were observing and commenting on it. However, after observing for a while, Lu Yi suddenly realized that something was wrong. "Brother Lu, is this star beast coming for us?" Tao Yan's expression became panicked. Zhou Xingji and Wanguliu's expressions also changed greatly. Because while they were watching, the butterfly star beast suddenly changed its direction and was rushing toward them. As the butterfly flapped its wings, the distance between them quickly shortened, and the ribbon across the starry sky floated over. The expressions of the people on the star boat became colorful. They felt that this journey was really full of disasters. A few days ago they were hit by the stellar magnetic storm, and today they encountered a strange star beast. All kinds of thoughts flashed through Lu Ye's mind, but in the end he gave up the idea of escaping. Although he didn't know what cultivation this star beast had, he knew from its speed that even if he drove the star boat as fast as he could, he wouldn't be able to outrun it. If this star beast didn't have any evil intentions, then it would be fine. But if it did, then they could only wash their necks clean. "Don't move and don't be nervous," Lu Yi hurriedly warned everyone. As soon as his voice fell, Tao Yan's teeth began to chatter. "Brother Lu, this is Ri. As they got closer, they could clearly see the terrifying aura of the butterfly. It was much stronger than Wan Xiao. It was clearly a Ri star beast. Lu Yi also stiffened. He couldn't figure out what was so special about this chaotic explosion zone that it could attract such powerful star beasts. On the way back, they had encountered the giant blue bird and hitched a ride with it. Now that they encountered this strange butterfly, they didn't know what would happen. Fortunately, although the aura of the butterfly star beast was extremely terrifying, it didn't seem to be hostile, which made Lu Yi and the others feel a little relieved. Moreover, the butterfly star beast didn't seem to be heading straight for them. Its huge body was like a sea of stars, gently gliding over the star boat not far away. It didn't seem to be interested in Lu Yi and the others at all. Colorful dust drifted down, gently imprinting itself on Lu Yi and the others. Naturally, they were wary of this strange dust. After all, no one knew what this butterfly star beast was, so no one could tell what kind of power this dust had. However, the range of this dust was too large. There was nowhere for them to hide, so they could only circulate their spiritual energy to protect themselves. Strangely, this dust didn't seem to be harmful at all. After it landed on them, it quickly melted like snowflakes. Chapter 1589. As the butterfly star beast flew away, Lu Ye's expression flickered. As the dust merged with his body, Lu Ye felt a strange resonance with the butterfly star beast that was flying further and further away. Due to this strange resonance, he felt as if he was losing control of his body. His talent tree suddenly reacted. As he looked at it, the tree suddenly burst into flames and thick black smoke rose into the air. Lu Ye's heart trembled. He knew that an external force had invaded his body and caused the talent tree to react. Could it be a deadly poison? If so, with the talent tree he might be able to escape this disaster, but Wangu Lu, Tao Yan and Zhou Xingji would most likely die. While urging the talent tree's power with all its might, he looked at Wangu Lu and the others. At this moment the three of them began to panic. Wangu Lu cried out in alarm, "That dust is poisonous." As he spoke he suddenly stood up. However, his movements were extremely stiff. It was as if there was an invisible string that had locked his body and controlled his movements, turning him into a puppet that was being manipulated. Wangu Lu's expression was clearly one of panic, but under Lu Ye's gaze, he spread his arms and began to move up and down like a butterfly flapping its wings. As he moved he walked back and forth on the star boat. At first glance, it looked as if he was performing some strange ceremony. His panic turned into astonishment. What's going on? Wangu Lu was extremely puzzled. He didn't want to do these movements at all, but he couldn't control his body at all. Not only him but Tao Yan and Zhou Xingji were also moving their arms up and down. Their expressions were clearly uneasy, but they were still making strange movements. The three of them slowly formed a circle with Lu Ye in the middle and kept spinning around. The corners of Lu Ye's eyes twitched when he saw this. 3-star mansions from different realms were showing off their beauty in front of him like ducks seeking a mate. This scene was really a bit unsightly. "I want to sing." Tao Yan was on the verge of tears. Rather than saying this sentence, it was better to say that he was singing it. His tone was very charming. "Me too." Zhou Xingji expressed that he was about to lose control of the desire in his heart and had to sing a few lines. "Yi, why are you fine?" Wangu Lu asked in a strange tone. At this moment, Lu Yi was observing the butterfly star beast in the distance. He discovered that every time the butterfly flapped its wings, Wangu Lu and the other two would move their arms. He was certain that their strange movements were influenced by the butterfly. Lu Yi couldn't help but shudder when he thought about the resonance between him and the butterfly star beast. Fortunately, he had the talent tree. Otherwise, he might have ended up like Wangu Lu and the others, singing and dancing. What kind of star beast was this? Although it didn't have any malicious intent towards them, and the dust didn't cause them any substantial harm, it was able to turn those who came into contact with it into puppets. The power of the dust was indeed very strange. "Do you feel anything unusual?" Lu Yi asked. "Nope," Tao Yan replied. Wangu Lu also sang along, "Very good, I suddenly feel very energetic." Zhou Xingji continued to sing, "And there's even a kind of joy in my heart that can't be vented." He clearly had an irrepressible smile on his face, but when he laughed, it was as if he was crying. The three of them sang one after another, and their singing was quite interesting. Lu Yi quietly observed them. Although he should be able to use the talent tree to help them solve their current problem, since the three of them didn't feel anything, he wasn't in a hurry to make a move. This was the first time he had encountered such a strange star beast, and Lu Yi wanted to observe it more. He wanted to see how long the effect of the dust would last. Or perhaps, once they were far enough away from the butterfly star beast, they wouldn't be affected anymore? The star boat became lively. Lu Yi steered the star boat forward, and the three men behind him sang and danced as if they were celebrating some kind of festival. The strange song spread into the depths of the starry sky as the star boat sailed. Half a day later, Lu Yi was certain that the butterfly star beast was very far away from them. However, the situation of Wangu Lu and the other two hadn't improved in the slightest. They were still singing and dancing. After waiting for another half a day, there was still no relief. Although the three of them didn't show any other abnormalities, Lu Yi couldn't be bothered to observe them any longer. Just as he was about to give them a hand, the three men who were singing and dancing suddenly stopped and sat down on the star boat. "Have they recovered?" Lu Yi asked. Wangu Lu and the other two looked at each other and nodded with lingering fear. This saved Lu Yi a lot of trouble. If Lu Yi wanted to help them, he would have to inject his spiritual energy into their bodies. Only then could he borrow the power of the talent tree to burn them. This would more or less affect their bodies and they might suffer some internal injuries. "Then you three should rest first," Lu Yi said. They weren't far from the Thousand Hills grave. Once they left the chaotic explosion zone and arrived at the Thousand Hills grave, the rest of the journey would be much easier. Wang Lu and the other two hurriedly called out to him. Lu Yi looked at the three of them in confusion, only to see them stammering. In the end it was Wang Lu who spoke first. What happened before? Lu Yi looked at them blankly. What happened before? Wang Lu was stunned, but Tao Yan's eyes lit up and he hurriedly said, No, nothing happened earlier. Zhou Xingji nodded his head like a chick pecking rice. The journey was peaceful and the starry sky was beautiful. How could anything have happened? Lu Yi turned around and continued steering the star boat. Wang Lu and the other two exchanged a glance, and they all saw the confusion on each other's faces. This matter was related to their reputation, and they definitely couldn't leak it. If the other cultivators in this realm learned about it, they would definitely be laughed at for the rest of their lives. After traveling for another half a month, they finally left the chaotic explosion zone. Wang Lu and the others looked at the magnificent starry sky in front of them, and they all fell into a daze. Lu Yi had seen a few starry sky wonders before, so he was more knowledgeable than them. Thus he remained calm and collected. He steered the star boat around for a while, but he didn't see any fleet from the three realms. He also didn't receive any reply from his transmission talisman. He could only wait. According to his calculations, the fleet couldn't stay in the chaotic explosion zone for too long, and they would definitely come out. As long as they came out, they would definitely follow the path on the star chart and arrive in the vicinity. At that time he would be able to contact them. However, the fleet speed was ultimately slower than his, so it was normal for him to be one step ahead. Wang Lu and the other two were already discussing whether there was something buried in the nebula burial mounds. Wang Lu speculated that there were definitely the corpses of powerhouses buried inside, while Zhou Xingji guessed that there were treasures inside. Tao Yin felt that the two of them were wrong, but he couldn't say why. Lu Yi didn't interrupt. He knew what was inside the nebula burial mounds, and those things were extremely beneficial to the improvement of a realm's foundation. If one day Little Nine could move 9 provinces to this place and then devour the things inside the nebula burial mounds to its heart's content, then 9 provinces' promotion to a top-grade realm would be just around the corner. However, although the nebula burial mounds were inanimate objects, they had an instinctive defensive ability. Before the defense of the nebula burial mounds was resolved, even if Little Nine moved 9 provinces here, it would be useless. Lu Yi looked around, wanting to see if he could find the blue bird or the burial mounds dug up by the blue bird. Unfortunately, as far as the eye could see, the burial mounds were all intact and the blue bird was nowhere to be seen, so he could only give up on this idea. After waiting for a few more days, the musical note suddenly moved. Lu Yi checked and found that it was a message from Yi. Soon he received a message from Wuxia. He was overjoyed, knowing that things were as he had guessed. After the fleet couldn't find them in the chaotic explosion zone, they chose to continue on their way. At this moment, the fleet should have left the chaotic explosion zone and not far away. Otherwise, the musical note wouldn't have been able to contact them. Lu Yi wasn't the only one who contacted them. Wang Lu, Tao Yin, and Zhou Xingji also sent people to contact them. After a while, they saw a fleet slowly sailing in the direction they came from. On the leading star ship, Wan Xiao's figure could be vaguely seen. There were also many people standing at the bow of the ship and waving at them. Soon they met up with each other. Seeing that Lu Yi had actually rescued Wang Lu and the others, Wan Xiao had a look of disbelief. She had seen the situation at that time. Although she didn't know why Lu Yi had the confidence to break into the stellar magnetic storm, even if he had the confidence, it would at most be to protect himself. Rescuing people in that kind of environment was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. But now Wang Lu and the others were with Lu Yi. This ability was really amazing. Fellow Taoist Wan. Lu Yi stepped forward and bowed. Wan Xiao said, After you left, the fleet searched for you for a few days, but they couldn't find any clues. I made the decision to let the fleet continue on because I thought that if you were safe you would continue on. The intersection between the chaotic explosion zone and the Thousand Hills tomb is the safest place to meet up. Lu Yi nodded. Fellow Taoist's decision is very wise. Wan Xiao glanced at Tao Yen behind Lu Yi. I still have to thank fellow Taoist for helping me. It's within my ability. I can't just stand by and watch. Wan Xiao said, Now that we're out of the chaotic explosion zone, I'd like to rest here for 2 days before setting off again. What do you think, fellow Taoist? Although the fleet mostly relied on the power of spirit jades, the cultivators also needed to use their spiritual energy to maintain some formations. However, there were enough cultivators on each spirit ship so they could take turns, so it wasn't too tiring. There was no danger of the chaotic explosion zone here, and the journey ahead was long. Resting for 2 days before setting off again would allow everyone to be more energetic. Fellow Taoist is the person in charge of the 3 realms. Just give the order. Seeing that he didn't have any objections, Yuan Xiao immediately gave the order. Chapter 1590. The fleet rested at the edge of the Thousand-Mound Grave for 2 days before continuing their journey. Although the Thousand-Mound Grave covered a large area, it wouldn't take too long to pass through. Lu Yi had taken less than a month to get there, and if the fleet was slower, a month would be more than enough. Passing through the Thousand-Mound Grave was the beginning of the test. Lu Yi remembered that when he left the Indefinite Galaxy had decided to prepare for a war against the Hive. A few years had passed since then, and he did not know how the situation was. The best-case scenario was that the 4 galaxies had already worked together to eliminate the Hive. Then they would not encounter any danger. However, no one could predict the exact direction of a war. If the war was ongoing, the 3 realms fleet would be in a war zone. Moreover, it would be a war zone with more than one sunshine expert. This was very likely to happen. Although a few years was not a short period of time, the 4 galaxies working together could not be accomplished overnight. Each galaxy would need to deploy their troops. Just this alone would take a lot of time. Then, they would need to meet with the Indefinite Galaxy before they could start the war against the Hive. On the planetary ship, Lu Yi explained the situation to Yuan Xiao. Yuan Xiao looked at him. "You have never mentioned this before." Lu Yi said, "It's useless to mention it in the past. We haven't reached this point yet, so it's only adding to our troubles. But now that we're here, we have to face the possible problems. Besides, even if I did mention it in advance, would the Jade Conch domain have given up on entering the Wanxiang Sea?" Yuan Xiao remained silent. She knew that Lu Yi was right. Even if Lu Yi had told them about the situation here, the Jade Conch domain would not have given up on entering the Wanxiang Sea. After a long while, Yuan Xiao asked, "How far do you think the war has progressed?" Lu Yi shook his head. "It's hard to predict. We have to see it with our own eyes. However, the 4 galaxies all have sunshine experts. They are also very interested in the Wanxiang Sea. When the time comes, they will follow us. That's why they decided to work together to eliminate the Hive. I've seen the Hive from afar. It is not small. I heard that there are 2 sunshine experts guarding it. However, the 4 galaxies also have sunshine experts. If we work together, it will not be difficult to eliminate the Hive. It is only a matter of time." Yuan Xiao said, "It seems that we still need to get in touch with the 4 cardinal star system. Since fellow Taoist has made contact with them before, how about I leave this matter to you?" Lu Yi replied, "It's my duty. When the time comes, the fleet can find a suitable place to hide. I'll go ahead and see if I can get in touch with a Pyron." It won't be too late for the fleet to move after confirming the situation in the war zone. The matter was settled for now. As for what to do when the time came, they could only take it one step at a time. Yuan Xiao was quite concerned about the indefinite star system. From what she knew, the indefinite star system was the closest star system to the Jade Conch. As long as they passed through the Thousand-Mound Grave and the chaotic explosion zone, they would cross paths. The reason why they didn't cross paths in the past was probably because of the barrier of the chaotic explosion zone. Now, the chaotic explosion zone was still there, but it wasn't as dangerous as before. Therefore, in the future, cultivators from the 2 galaxies might cross paths. As the leader of Jade Conch Galaxy, Yuan Xiao felt it was her responsibility to take this opportunity to improve her relationship with a Pyron. After all, a Pyron had sunshine, which was what Jade Conch wanted. The fleet continued to sail. Suddenly, everyone sensed something strange. On the planetary ships, figures gathered and looked into the depths of the Thousand-Mound Grave. On Jade Conch's planetary ship, Lu Yi and Yuan Xiao stood side by side. Yuan Xiao's expression was grave. She had already ordered the fleet to stop. This was because there were violent fluctuations of a battle coming from ahead. As far as the eye could see, there were colorful lights blooming from time to time. "Is this a battle between Sunshine and a Pyron?" Lu Yi asked uncertainly. They were too far away, so he could only vaguely sense it. However, Yuan Xiao's cultivation was much higher than his, so she should be able to sense it more clearly. Yuan Xiao nodded. "To Sunshine. However, from the energy fluctuations, it doesn't seem to be a battle between cultivators. It's more like a battle between star beasts." He felt that the colorful lights that occasionally bloomed were very familiar. Now that he thought about it, could it be the butterfly star beast they had encountered earlier? As for the other side, could it be the blue bird? If it was those 2 fellows, then it made sense why they were fighting so fiercely. Moreover, the butterfly star beast had indeed been flying toward the thousand-mound grave earlier. The blue bird was very interested in the things in the nebula grave. Moreover, star beasts like wild beasts had their own territories. If the butterfly star beast had rashly entered the blue bird's territory, there would definitely be a conflict. The fleet could not withstand the aftermath of such a battle. Yuan Xiao's order to stop was undoubtedly a wise decision. At this moment, she stood at the bow of the ship and looked into the distance. Her eyes were filled with yearning. In terms of cultivation, she had already reached Yu Yao's limit. However, she was still unable to break through the shackles and see through the secrets of sunshine. This time, she was leading the fleet to the 10,000-mound sea in hopes of finding an opportunity. Otherwise, Jade Conk and Yu Yao would have been enough. They would have sent a mid-stage Yu Yao instead of her. Lu Yi looked into the distance. He wanted to sense who was stronger and who was weaker. However, no matter how he tried, he could not figure it out. However, from the bottom of his heart, he hoped that the blue bird would win. After all, he owed the blue bird a debt of gratitude. If there was a chance in the future, he might even be able to hitch a ride. The butterfly star beast was different. The dust that it scattered when it flapped its wings was very strange. If it weren't for Lu Ye's innate skill tree, he would have definitely made a fool of himself like Wangu Lu and the others. No one knew when this battle had started. The fleet only felt the aftermath of the battle when they arrived, so they had no idea how long it would last. The fleet waited here for more than 10 days, but the battle still did not seem to be over. It seemed like it would continue for a long time. Yuan Xiao knew that they could not continue waiting like this. The battle between the Sunshine Star beasts might not end even after waiting for several years. The fleet could not afford to waste so much time here. After discussing it with Lu Yi, they decided to take a small detour. Although this would take a bit more time, it was better than waiting aimlessly. The fleet continued to set sail, gradually leaving the area covered by the aftermath of the battle. A simple detour took nearly a month. They had originally planned to leave the thousand-mound grave in a month, but in the end, it took them 2 months. Just as the fleet was about to leave the range of the thousand-mound grave, a powerful aura suddenly approached them from behind. Lu Yi, who was cultivating in his cabin, felt his heart skip a beat. He quickly went to the deck and looked back, only to see a colorful streak of light rapidly approaching them from behind. The corner of Lu Ye's eyes twitched. He felt that this trip to the 10,000 Elephant Sea was really unlucky. He had seen the strange dust that the butterfly star beast scattered. Therefore, when he saw that the butterfly star beast was heading in the same direction as the fleet, he immediately warned them. At the same time, he sent a voice transmission to Yuan Xiao, asking her to change the course of the ship. They had to avoid the star beast no matter what. Yuan Xiao also knew that the situation was not good. Even if she did not know the background of the butterfly star beast, with Sunshine chasing after them, anyone would feel scared. She immediately followed Lu Ye's advice and steered the ship to the side. The ships and starships behind them hurriedly followed. A short while later, the butterfly star beast flew past the fleet of starships. The cultivators of the 3 realms on the starships were all staring at it with nervous expressions on their faces. However, what made them feel slightly relieved was that the star beast did not even look at them as if they were nothing. It just flew past them, leaving the colorful streak of light behind it. Lu Yi clearly saw that the butterfly star beast had many terrifying wounds on its body. Even its wings seemed to be a little tattered. It was obvious that it had suffered a loss in the previous battle. If it was the blue bird that he had seen before, he wondered how the blue bird was doing. However, looking at the butterfly star beast's posture, it should have been defeated, which was why it left the thousand-mound grave. Thinking about it this way, the blue bird was indeed stronger. Old one, why is your face so pale? On a starship in the land of the 9 provinces, Gan Wudong looked curiously at Wan Guliu, who was standing beside him. They both worked in Haoyan City in the War Province. One was the head of the law department, while the other was the head of the official department. They met frequently, so they were naturally familiar with each other. Beside Gan Wudong, Fan Xiangyi also looked at him with concern. Are you okay? Wan Guliu shivered and said stubbornly, I'm fine. I just caught a cold. I'll go back and rest for a while. After saying that, he quickly slipped back into the cabin. Gan Wudong and Fan Xiangyi were left confused. He was already a member of the 9 provinces. How could he catch a cold? Wasn't this nonsense? However, since Wan Guliu was unwilling to say, they could not force him. They only secretly paid more attention to him in the next few days. Wan Guliu of the land of the 9 provinces was not the only one who caught a cold. Zhou Xingji of the Qingli Taoist world and Tao Yan of the Yushui Taoist world also caught a cold. The three of them had almost forgotten about that terrible experience. Who would have thought that the butterfly star beast would appear in front of them again? Fortunately, Lu Yi warned them early this time, and Wan Xiao's decision was fast enough. The entire fleet avoided the area covered by the streak of light. Otherwise, the scene of the entire fleet in 509 provinces singing and dancing together was unimaginable. The fleet successfully left the thousand-mound grave and entered another part of the starry sky. This was not the indefinite galaxy. It was just a nameless region. Looking at the starry sky, there were many such regions. They were basically barren star regions with no value. For tens of thousands of years, except for star beasts, very few cultivators had set foot in this place. However, when Lu Yi passed through this place, this was the territory of the insect race. The insect race's nest was right in front of them, almost at the border of the indefinite galaxy. Chapter 1591. In the barren star field between the Thousand Hills tomb and the indefinite star field, Lu Yi moved forward in a lone boat. He was neither fast nor slow. He took the lead, and the fleet followed him from afar within the range of the musical notes communication range. Because they couldn't determine the situation ahead, the fleet couldn't rush in rashly. It would be bad if the battle here was in full swing and the fleet was involved. Lu Yi was in the vanguard alone. If there were any abnormalities, he could send a message back in time and the fleet could respond in time. The last time he had passed by this place, he had occasionally seen active insectoids. This time, however, there was not even a shadow of an insectoid. Lu Yi wondered if the war was over and the insectoid nest had been wiped out. Otherwise, this area wouldn't be so peaceful. Moreover, the butterfly astral beast had also flown in this direction, but Lu Yi didn't see any trace of it along the way. He didn't know where the butterfly astral beast had flown to. However, it had been injured in the Thousand Hills tomb and had most likely gone to find a place to recuperate. This place was desolate and uninhabited, making it the best place to recuperate. After flying forward for 2 months, Lu Yi saw the huge hive in the distance. He knew the battle here wasn't over, otherwise the hive wouldn't still be there. Although the hive was still there were countless lights flashing around it, and there were also energy fluctuations of both strong and weak coming from there. This situation clearly showed that there were cultivators attacking the hive over there. This battle has been going on for a long time, Lu Yi thought to himself. He didn't know when the battle here started, but it still hadn't ended. Since the hive was being attacked, there must be cultivators from the indefinite star field or the other 3 galaxies. Lu Yi sent a message to the fleet behind him, telling them to temporarily lie low and wait while he went up to check out the situation. Wan Xiao quickly replied, telling him to be careful. Continuing forward, Lu Yi blessed himself with concealment and aura-concealing spirit runes and quietly approached the battlefield. When he got closer, he slowly saw the specific situation over there and couldn't help but be shocked. It was because there were warships gathered around the enormous insect nest. These warships were undoubtedly large warships. They were so large that they were not something a small warship like the Tiger Shark could compare to. There were about 200 of these large battleships and their styles were quite different. However, considering that these battleships were jointly formed by the 4 galaxies, the difference in style was understandable. After all, they didn't come from the same family. Next to the large starships were a number of small and medium-sized starships, and the various lights Lu Yi had seen in the distance had come from these starships. From afar, one could only see flashes of light. Up close, one could feel the terrifying might of the attacks. Every attack from the large battleship was no weaker than an all-out attack from Yu Yao. Among all the warships, the warship that faced the hive was the largest. The other warships were not small, but they paled in comparison to the hive. However, the size of this warship was comparable to the hive. Just like that, the 2 colossi stood in confrontation in the starry sky for an unknown period of time. When Lu Yi saw this, he knew that the 4-way system was launching an all-out attack on the insectoid nest. Although their attacks were fierce, it didn't seem like they would be able to do anything to the insectoid nest in a short amount of time. The insectoid hive was not just a place to nurture their clansmen. It was a war fortress with both offense and defense. At this very moment, Pingsang Luo Tua Xing Luo Hong Shaoshan Luo Muanai Ho Muanai Ho Muanai Ho Muanai Ho Muanai Ho Muanai Ho Muanai. There were no signs of any insectoids though. Lu Yi guessed that the insectoids were hiding in their nest. Under such a ferocious onslaught, the insectoids would not dare to show themselves. Since this was the case, there was no need for Lu Yi to hide. He removed the spiritual tattoos on his body and revealed himself, heading straight for the largest battleship. Before he could get close, he was discovered by a large battleship nearby. Soon, a figure flew out of the battleship and blocked Lu Ye's path from afar. The figure shouted, "Who goes there?" The main reason was that Lu Ye's position was not right. The cultivators of the four-way system would only come from the indefinite star system, but Lu Yi came from the Thousand Hills tomb. Therefore it was obvious that he was not from the four-way system. At this critical juncture of the war, the four-way system's defenses were naturally strong. However, Lu Ye's cultivation was not high. He was only a star constellation cultivator. Therefore, although they noticed him, only Yu Yao came out. Lu Yi stopped and looked over. He realized that he did not know this Yu Yao. Aside from the few Yu Yao from the indefinite realm, the only other Yu Yao he knew was from the exalted realm. It was normal that he did not know her. He cupped his hands and said, "Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens greets you, fellow Taoist." Yu Yao was stunned. Then she asked in surprise, "You're Lu Yi of the Nine Heavens?" He obviously knew who Lu Yi was. This was normal. The reason the four-way system had been able to reach an agreement so quickly to eliminate the insectoid nest was because everyone wanted to follow Lu Yi to the Wanxiang Sea. However, if they wanted Lu Yi to return safely, they had to eliminate this insectoid nest first. Otherwise, with the insectoids entrenched here, it would not be safe for Lu Yi to return. If Lu Yi was captured and killed by the insectoids, they would have no way to return to the Wanxiang Sea. Otherwise, even though the other three systems knew that they would be intimately interdependent, they would still have to make the indefinite star system bleed before agreeing to join forces. After all, the insectoid nest was located at the indefinite star system's doorstep, not theirs. It was inevitable that the four-way system would join forces to eliminate the insectoid nest. It was also destined to happen. However, Lu Ye's arrival and the allure of the Wanxiang Sea had pushed this outcome forward, reducing the resistance of the four-way system. Moreover, only by eliminating this insectoid nest would everyone have the time to think about the Wanxiang Sea. Otherwise, no one would be in the mood to send anyone to the Wanxiang Sea. That's right. Good timing. Yu Yao was overjoyed. Senior brother Rizhao has been waiting for you for a long time. Come with me. As he said this, he channeled his magic power and wrapped it around Lu Yi. They flew towards the super-large warship. Yu Yao and Lu Yi chatted casually along the way. Lu Yi mainly asked about the current situation. From Yu Yao's words, Lu Yi learned that the war had indeed reached a critical juncture. This war had actually begun more than half a year after Lu Yi left. However, the four-way system needed time to mobilize their forces. Moreover, it would not have taken much effort if they had simply wanted to chase the insectoid nest away. However, the powerhouses of the four-way system didn't just want to chase the insectoid nest away. If they did, the insectoid nest could come back again. Therefore, the powerhouses of the four-way system wanted to completely eliminate the insectoid nest. Once they had gathered enough manpower, they would make various arrangements to gradually chip away at the insectoid forces on the periphery. Then they would gradually form an encirclement around the insectoid nest. This was why it had taken so long. Lu Yi was somewhat puzzled as he looked at the gigantic insectoid nest in the starry sky. Insectoid nests are said to be the insectoid race's war fortresses. They can float around in the starry sky. Based on the defensive strength of this insectoid nest, if it sensed that something was wrong and wanted to escape, we shouldn't be able to stop it, right? Although the four-way system had dispatched many warships and formed an encirclement, if such a gigantic insectoid nest really wanted to break out of the encirclement, those large warships alone would not be able to stop it. Yao laughed. This is all thanks to senior brother Rizhao's foresight. Before the encirclement was completed, a few senior brothers forced their way into the insectoid nest and destroyed some of its cores. Therefore, although the insectoid nest can move, it's very slow. Because it was slow, even if it managed to break out of the encirclement, it would be pointless. It would only be pursued by the warships from the four-way system. Moreover, moving such a gigantic insectoid nest consumed a lot of energy. Rather than wasting energy to move, it was better to focus it on defense. Lu Ye's heart surged as he listened. Such a gigantic insectoid nest must have countless experts inside. Moreover, it was said that there were 2 Rizhao insectoids guarding it. Yet, several Rizhao had actually worked together to force their way in. In the end, it seemed that they had achieved their goal. It was hard to imagine how they had accomplished such a difficult task. Then, can the insectoids only wait for death now? Lu Yi asked. Yu Yao nodded. Indeed. Once we break through its defenses, Exterminating this insectoid army will be as easy as snapping a finger. This was the confidence of a large realm with a strong foundation. If it were the 9 provinces that were targeted by such an insectoid nest, they would be the ones waiting for death. After a pause, he sighed softly. It's a pity that senior brother Qinzong of Beixian was injured in the previous battle. I wonder how he's doing now. I'll go take a look. From his words, it was clear that he was also from the Beixian galaxy. As the two spoke, they arrived at the gigantic battleship. Inside, they could feel the grandeur of the battleship. This was definitely the work of a realm's top experts. It should have come from a Pyron. However, even with a Pyron's foundation, she probably wouldn't have a second battleship like this. If it weren't for the insectoid nest, she wouldn't have sent such a battleship. When the 9 provinces could reach a Pyron's level, they would barely be able to establish themselves in space and deal with most of the dangers that came from space. As for now, it was still too early. Yu Yao of Beixian led Lu Yi straight to the center. Soon they arrived at a spacious hall. At this moment, there were many cultivators gathered in the hall. Many of them were busy working on the complicated formations. Constantly, there were reports coming from all directions, allowing the experts here to have a clearer understanding of the situation on the battlefield. As soon as Lu Yi entered, he felt several gazes on him. He turned to look and found that most of the faces were unfamiliar. Only one valiant woman he recognized was a Pyron Rizhao, whom he had met last time. Chapter 1592. Brother Lu is here. Lu Yi looked toward the source of the laughter and saw someone he recognized. He quickly cupped his fist. Brother Kong. It was Kong Qing of Indefinite. His arm had been destroyed by Ye Ye's punch, but he had a good temperament. He acted as if nothing had happened, and he even took the initiative to befriend Lu Yi. I've been wondering when you'd come back. I didn't expect you to come back so soon. Kong Qing seemed to be in a good mood. When Lu Yi left Indefinite, he didn't know when he'd come back. Traveling through space would take a long time, so Indefinite had been prepared to wait. Who knew Lu Yi would come back so soon? Fortunately, everything went smoothly. There were no delays, Lu Yi replied. Kong Qing said enthusiastically, Come. Let me introduce you to a few senior brothers Rizhao. As he spoke, he pointed at the woman Lu Yi had met before. This is senior sister Li Guan from Apeiron. You've met her before. Lu Yi only learned her name now. Although they'd met before, they hadn't had much to talk about. He'd only asked her about the insectoids before continuing on his journey. Lu Yi quickly bowed and Li Guan nodded. Kong Qing then pointed at a cold-looking man next to Li Guan. This is senior brother Ning Bueo from Indefinite. Among the 3 Rizhao of Indefinite, there were only Li Guan and Ning Bueo besides Jiang Shang. Now that Jiang Shang was overseeing the region, Li Guan and Ning Bueo were both here. Next, Lu Yi met Wuxia from the Daluo Galaxy, Bai Jin from the Quiet Moon Galaxy, and Qinzong from the Beixian Galaxy. They all bowed respectfully. Rizhao was one of the top cultivators in this part of the universe. No matter where you looked, he was worthy of respect. Wuxia of the Daluo Galaxy was much more amiable than the other Rizhao masters. He smiled and said a few words to Lu Yi. When he mentioned Luo Shenxi, Lu Yi guessed that Wuxia must have heard some of Luo Shenxi's words, which was why he looked at him differently. Of course, it was also because of the Wanxiang Sea. Right now, Lu Yi was a key figure in entering the Wanxiang Sea. Even if his cultivation was far below theirs, they still did their best to treat him with respect. Qinzong from Beixian was indeed injured, probably from when he barged into the insect nest. His face was a little pale and there was a faint smell of blood on him. The essence, qi, and spirit of a sunshine cultivator had been refined to the extreme. Ordinary injuries could be easily healed. Qinzong's injuries didn't seem to be simple. Who knew if it would affect his ability? Quiet Moon Galaxy's Bai Jin was also very kind to Lu Yi. However, whenever Lu Yi faced Ri, he always had a strange feeling, but he couldn't tell what it was. From the looks of it, the 4 galaxies had sent out a total of 5 Nichokas. Aside from Apeiron, who had 2, the other 3 galaxies had sent out 1 each. With such a powerful lineup and a decent fleet of warships, it was more than enough to deal with an insectoid nest. After all, according to the information they had, there were only 2 sunshine insectoids in the hive. 5 against 2, there was no way they would lose. Fellow Taoist Lu, did you come here alone? Kong Qing asked. The reason why he asked this was because he remembered that Lu Yi said that he would bring some people out from the 9 skies. But now that he only saw Lu Yi, he was a little confused. Lu Yi replied, There's a fleet from the mainland following us. Because I'm not sure about the situation here, I went ahead to scout ahead. The fleet is lying in ambush behind us. Lu Yi nodded and took out a sound talisman to send a message to Luan Xiaoa, informing her of the situation. Luan Xiaoa immediately agreed and rushed over with the fleet. Lu Yi waited in the central hall. During this time, several Rizhao asked him some questions and Lu Yi told them everything he knew. Under normal circumstances, a constellation like him wouldn't have the qualifications to talk to Rizhao face to face. It was only because Four-Way Galaxy needed his help that he had such an opportunity. Half a day later, Luan Xiaoa sent a message to him, informing him that the fleet had arrived near the battlefield. Lu Yi ended the conversation with the Rizhao, excused himself and left the central hall. Flying out of the super-large warship, Lu Yi flew towards the fleet. After meeting up with each other, he saw that everyone on the fleet was standing on one side of the ship, dazzled by the huge battle over there. The cultivators of the three realms had never seen such a scene before. Not to mention the cultivators of the 9 continents, even the cultivators of the Jade Conch continent had never seen such a scene. Feeling the intensity of the battle here, they were all shaken, especially the super-large warship, which was even more amazing. Although they are all large realms, the difference between them and Rizhao is still too big. Luan Xiaoa sighed with emotion. Lu Yi smiled and said, "Fellow Taoist, don't think too much. The fleet here is jointly formed by the 4 galaxies. It doesn't belong to any one galaxy." Luan Xiaoa knew that he was comforting her. She shook her head and said, "But each of them should have the ability to form such a fleet." "That's true." Luan Xiaoa gathered her thoughts and asked, "What's the situation here? The hive doesn't seem to be able to fight back." Lu Yi told her everything he knew in detail, then said, "The hive is destined to be destroyed. Once the hive's defenses are broken, the 4 galaxies' allied forces will be able to achieve victory in one fell swoop. Apiron wants us to go ahead and wait in the unbounded realm. Once the battle here is over, they will follow us to the Wanxiang Sea." Luan Xiao was stunned. "All these warships are going?" Lu Yi shook his head. "I don't know, but since they came to the unbounded realm, they should follow us." Luan Xiao was speechless. When news of the Wanxiang Sea reached Jade Conch continent, they finally decided to send her along with 100 people. However, compared to the 4 galaxies' extravagance, Jade Conch continent's decision seemed too petty. Looking at it now, Jade Conch continent seemed to have missed a great opportunity. They were obviously closer to Lu Yi, but they let outsiders bask in more glory. But now there was no point in being upset. After thinking for a moment, Luan Xiaoa said, "Fellow Taoist Lu, I have an idea." Lu Yi looked at her seriously. "Please speak, fellow Taoist. It's rare to come across such a grand battle. Since we've encountered it, it would be a pity to miss it. You said that the Wanxiang Sea is in chaos and there are many conflicts. It won't be easy for us to establish ourselves in the Wanxiang Sea. Perhaps we'll have to fight against the heavens and other people. Right now, we have a chance to let the cultivators of the 3 realms experience the battle in space in advance. Moreover, it doesn't seem like we need to take too much risk. What do you think?" Lu Yi immediately understood what she meant. He hadn't thought about this before. After all, this was someone else's battle and they were just passers-by. It didn't seem right for them to rashly interfere. Kang Cheng had asked him to lead people to the unbounded realm first because he was afraid that the battle would cause Lu Yi and his men to suffer losses. However, some things were probably useless. Luan Xiao was right. This kind of opportunity was hard to come by. Participating in such a battle, even if it was just cheering from the sidelines, would greatly broaden the horizons of the cultivators of the 3 realms. It would allow them to have a deeper understanding of the dangers in space. Of course, the most important thing was that they wouldn't need to take any risks. Now that the insectoid hive was surrounded, it was only a matter of time before its defenses were breached. Once the defenses of the insectoid hive were breached, what followed would be a one-sided massacre. That's not bad. The more Lu Yi thought about it, the more he felt that Luan Xiao's idea was feasible. He pondered for a moment, then said, "I'll go talk to someone and see if they'll allow us to participate in the battle." If they didn't allow it, then his wishful thinking wouldn't work. However, Lu Yi reckoned that the Rikshitas of the 4 realms wouldn't refuse. Even flies were meat. Although the overall strength of the 3 realms fleet wasn't that great, it still had 500 constellations and 1 late-stage Yu Yao. Lu Yi soon returned to the central hall of the super-large warship. He found Kang Cheng and told him about it. The reason why he didn't talk to Kang Cheng and not the Rikshitas was because Kang Cheng was in charge of the battle. The Rikshitas were only in charge of the final battle. Kang Cheng smiled and said, It's a good thing that the cultivators of your galaxy want to help us. The Four Realms fleet is very grateful. He pondered for a moment, then said, "How about this? I see that your galaxy has 16 planetary ships. Let's divide them according to your original planetary ships and send them to each warship. What do you think, fellow Taoist?" Planetary ships couldn't play a role in such a battle. Only warships could. Therefore, if the Jade Conch cultivators wanted to participate in the battle, they would have to enter the enemy's warships. What they could do was very simple. They just had to pour their spiritual energy into the formations and provide energy for the various attacks of the warships. This way they could save on the consumption of spiritual jades to a certain extent. Otherwise, the indefinite galaxy wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks of the warships alone. The power provided by the 500 lunar mansions could at least save a lot of spiritual jades for the Four Realms. This was why Kong Qing didn't refuse. "Fellow Taoist Kong, you can make the arrangements. Since the cultivators of the Jade Conch galaxy have decided to participate in the battle, we are a part of it. We will obey your orders," Lu Yi declared. The Rikshitas beside him nodded slightly. They had heard about Lu Yi before. They were afraid that Lu Yi would think that he could take them to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Now it seemed that this young man was quite a good person. "Also, your galaxy has 5 Tiger Shark warships. I will send some people to deliver some spiritual jades. Let's ask those 5 warships to provide mobile support." Lu Yi naturally had no objections to this arrangement. Kong Qing summoned Indefinite Yu Yao and had her take Lu Yi to make the arrangements. After a short while, Lu Yi brought Indefinite Yu Yao to the fleet. Lu Yi explained Kong Qing's arrangements. Wan Xiao said that there was no problem, and the fleet followed Indefinite Yu Yao to the battlefield. The cultivators of the 3 realms had undoubtedly been informed by Wan Xiao in advance. At this moment they were all excited. Everything else aside, they could at least enter a large warship to broaden their horizons. Chapter 1593. When the fleet set off for the battlefield, Lu Yi returned to the planetary ship of the 9 states. He found Lan Qiyu and warned her, "Remember, don't use the blood race's secret technique. Just pretend to be a human who cultivates the secret technique of the blood Tao." Ordinary members of the blood race couldn't disguise themselves as humans because just their appearance was different. However, Lan Qiyu was different from ordinary members of the blood race. She was originally a human, but after accidentally refining a drop of sacred blood, she transformed into a member of the blood race. Before becoming a constellation, she had always looked like a member of the blood race. However, after becoming a constellation, her body seemed to have undergone some miraculous changes, allowing her to transform into her original human appearance. If not for this, Lu Yi wouldn't have dared to bring Lan Qiyu on this trip to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. After all, members of the blood race and the insect race didn't have a good reputation in the universe. They were practically hated by everyone. Therefore, even in a place as vast as the 10,000 Elephant Sea, cultivators from these 2 races were rarely seen. At the very least, Lu Yi had never seen the Blood Clan and the Insect Clan outside of the Constellation Hall's auction for the past few years in the Myriad Phenomenon Sea. However, it was said that some members of the blood race cultivated a unique secret technique that allowed them to conceal their blood race characteristics and disguise themselves as humans. Therefore, it wasn't necessarily true that members of the blood race were active on the 10,000 Elephant Sea. However, they all hid very well and didn't dare to expose themselves easily. Lu Yi had warned Lan Qiyu about this before they left the 9 states. If Lan Qiyu hadn't been able to conceal her blood race characteristics, Lu Yi wouldn't have dared to bring her to the 10,000 Elephant Sea. Lan Qiyu nodded seriously. "I'll remember it, senior brother." Soon, the fleet set off for the battlefield under Indefinite Yu Yao's leadership. According to the previous agreement, the cultivators on each planetary ship were assigned to a warship to help out. Soon, the cultivators on the 16 planetary ships of the 3 realms were assigned. The remaining 5 Tigershark warships didn't need to be bothered with them. Kong Qing had allowed them to provide mobile support so they could do whatever they wanted. Yu Yao even gave them some spirit jades. There were quite a lot of spirit jades, causing the cultivators on the Tigershark warships to beam with joy. Wan Xiao stayed on one of the warships to wait for orders. With her late-stage Yu Yao cultivation, she didn't need to do the same thing as the constellations. It would be a waste of her talents. When the insectoid nest defenses were breached, there would naturally be a time when she would need to contribute in close combat. Lu Yi was on the same warship as a group of people close to him. They weren't given any tasks and were allowed to move freely. Clearly, a Pairan Yueyao who had brought them here had secretly told them something, which was why he was given such special treatment. He walked around and looked around. Suddenly he heard a familiar voice. "Brother Lu." Lu Yi turned around and saw that it was Su Dingyang who had called out to him. This guy didn't get along well with him before and even brought Kong Cheng to cause trouble for him. In the end they returned empty-handed. Later, Lu Yi went to the unbounded boundary and discussed with Jiang Shang about entering the Wanxiang Sea. Coupled with Lu Ye's protection, even Kong Qingdu was polite to him, let alone Su Dingyang, who didn't even dare to show his face. It couldn't be helped because Kong Cheng had specially instructed him earlier that if he had the chance, he must resolve the conflict between him and Lu Yi because he was a member of the group that would be heading to the Myriad Ocean as well. "So it's Brother Su." Lu Yi nodded and walked forward. He realized that Su Dingyang was in charge of one of the offensive formations on the warship. The formation was extremely complicated. Even with Lu Ye's knowledge of formations, he could only make out a few superficial details. Seeing Lu Ye's interest, Su Dingyang said, "If Brother Lu is interested, why don't you give it a try?" Lu Yi was stunned. Really? He was indeed quite interested in these things. After all, the attacks unleashed by the large battleships were equivalent to the attacks unleashed by cultivators like Yu Yao. He was still some distance away from Yu Yao, and he couldn't unleash them on his own at the moment. Thus, it wouldn't be a bad idea to borrow the power of the spell formation to personally experience them. "No problem," Su Dingyang said and stepped aside. Lu Yi stood on the warship. Su Dingyang guided him carefully from the side. Lu Yi quickly understood the trick. It was nothing more than activating the formation's power and then activating the formation's core. Then it would launch a long-range attack on the insect hive. However, activating the formation consumed a lot of energy. He couldn't do it alone. Not only did it require a lot of spirit jades, but it also required energy from many other auxiliary formations. Most of the cultivators of the three realms did this. They provided energy to the auxiliary formations and tried their best to reduce the consumption of spirit jades. Otherwise, relying on the energy of spirit jades to activate this weapon would consume a lot of energy. Lu Yi stood in the middle of the formation and hugged the dragon-headed weapon with both hands. He poured his divine sense into it and locked onto the giant insect hive in the distance. He quietly sensed the energy accumulating in the formation and waited for a good opportunity. After a long time, Lu Yi felt that the energy was almost ready. The entire formation began to hum. Su Dingyang said, "Now's the time, Brother Lu." Lu Yi hurriedly mobilized the huge amount of energy to activate the formation. Then, the dragon-headed weapon in his hands began to tremble. With a loud hum, Lu Yi felt his body shake. Then he saw a bright beam of light shoot out from the dragon's head. It landed on the insect nest in an instant, causing ripples to spread out on the surface of the insect nest. Amazing! Lu Yi sighed. In the entire universe, there weren't many methods that could allow the constellations to use Yu Yao's power. Warships were the most common type. He could clearly feel the power of that attack. It was almost equivalent to the full power of a mid-stage Yu Yao. And this might be the result of 20 to 30 constellations working together. However, although this method could unleash Yu Yao's power, it wasn't her doing it. So, it was a little rigid. Moreover, it took a long time to charge up. This was a common flaw of warships. Therefore, warships were mostly used to attack cities. The current situation was the best time to use warships. The large warships in the unbounded realm were probably not the best. The most extreme large warships could unleash power comparable to that of a late-stage Yu Yao. Over the next half a day, Lu Yi tried to activate the formation a few more times. Only when he was satisfied did he walk out. Although activating this thing was interesting, it wasn't his power. So he didn't care much about it. The defenses of the insect hive were clearly weakening. The light screen was dimming at a rate visible to the naked eye. If this situation continued, the insect hive's defenses would be broken in half a month. There was almost no suspense in this battle. However, at a certain moment 3 days later, Lu Yi was shocked to find that the defenses of the insect hive had suddenly dissipated. He was stunned, but he quickly realized that the insectoids probably knew that they couldn't hold on any longer. They were probably going to fight to the death. After all, if this continued, they would only be waiting for death. It was better to take advantage of this opportunity to counterattack. Killing one would be enough and killing two would be worth it. Almost at the same time that the insect hive's defenses disappeared, dark clouds floated out of the insect hive and quickly scattered in all directions. These dark clouds of various sizes were formed by the insectoids. There was no lack of Yu Yao's aura among them. Outside the encirclement, the attacks from the warships from the four galaxies suddenly became much fiercer. Under the attack of the colorful lights, the insect clouds were damaged, but the insect clouds seemed to be endless. They continued to float out of the insect hive. From the looks of it, the insectoids were going to move out in full force. Even on the warship, Lu Yi could feel the aura of two sunshine powerhouses rising from the insect hive. They were clearly the two sunshine powerhouses of the insectoids. At the same time, in the direction of Apeiron's large warship, 5 figures shot out at almost the same time. Their auras were as powerful as the sun. Lu Yi sensed them and immediately turned to look. He saw that they were the 5 sunshine powerhouses from the 4 galaxies. After a moment of thought, he immediately understood why these 5 were so eager to attack. The aftermath of the battle between the sunshine powerhouses was too strong. They had to keep the 2 sunshine powerhouses in the insect hive and not let them escape. Otherwise, once the battle between the sunshine powerhouses spread out, the 4 galaxies' warships would definitely suffer losses. Limiting the battle to the insect hive was the wisest thing to do. This must have been something Ning Bueo and the others had discussed beforehand. That was why they acted so decisively the moment the insect hive's protection disappeared. The 5 figures went against the flow of the insect clouds. Everywhere they went, there was a rain of blood. Who knew how many insectoids were killed? In a flash, the 5 of them arrived in front of the insect hive. One of them suddenly stopped, while the other 4 charged into the insect hive without slowing down. Lu Yi looked from afar and realized that the one who stayed outside the insect hive was the female Sunshine, Manager Li. She held a long sword in her hand, and the light from it was cold. She didn't stay here to watch the show. She stayed to prevent Sunshine from escaping. The 4 Sunshine powerhouses entered the insect hive. As long as they dealt with 2 insectoids, it would be 2 against 1. There was no chance of failure. So, it didn't matter whether she was there or not. But if the insectoid Sunshine sensed that something was wrong and wanted to escape, she could stop him from outside. The place she was in became a forbidden area. Large numbers of insectoids flew past her, but she didn't even look at them. She only used her divine will to monitor the situation inside the insect hive. Naturally, the insectoids wouldn't dare to provoke her. On the warship, Lu Yi saw this and knew that the final battle had come. He immediately became alert. The insectoids were here. Chapter 1594. The power of a warship was quite effective when it came to sieging a city. However, if it was used in a battle like this, it was barely satisfactory. After all, the warship's attacks were all controlled by Constellation Realm cultivators, and the long time it took to accumulate power and recharge was a drawback that couldn't be erased. Thus, even with the might of a warship, the insectoids would probably arrive before they could even launch a few attacks. In a battle like this, the cultivators still had to rely on themselves. However, before the insectoid swarm approached, the warship still tried its best to eliminate the insectoids. Lu Yi frowned slightly because something seemed to be amiss. Given the current situation, the insectoids should have gathered all their forces in one place. Breaking through the encirclement of the warships from the 4 galaxies was the right way to go. As long as they could create a gap in the encirclement of the warships from the 4 galaxies, they would be able to seize the initiative whether they continued to fight or flee. However, in reality, the insectoids that had rushed out of the hive were scattered in all directions like celestial maidens scattering flowers. As a result, the insectoids couldn't concentrate their forces. Thus, the warships in each direction didn't face much pressure. The insectoids would definitely suffer a large number of casualties. Lu Yi couldn't understand why the insectoids were doing this. One had to realize that the insectoids born from this kind of hive weren't the same as the ones he had encountered in the 9 states. Many of them were extremely intelligent, and with the hive as the center, all the insectoids could be easily commanded and obeyed orders. On the warship Lu Yi was on, a large swarm of insectoids also rushed over. Although many had been killed along the way, there was still a relatively large number of insectoids remaining. The distance between the 2 sides rapidly closed. At a certain moment, the cultivators who had long since been prepared, charged out of the warship under the leadership of the Yu Yao and charged toward the insectoid swarm. Yuan Xiao flew at the forefront, and the Yu Yao from the 4 galaxies were beside her. They spread out their divine senses and soon found other insectoids in the insectoid swarm. They locked onto their targets and quickly charged toward them. Although this battle seemed chaotic, there was actually a corresponding order to it. Simply put, it was soldier against soldier, general against general. The Yu Yao would try their best to find other Yu Yao opponents. Regardless of whether they could defeat them or not, they had to at least pin them down. Relatively speaking, the cultivators were much fewer in number than the insectoids, at least 100 times more. However, the insectoids were far inferior in terms of quality. After all, the cultivators were at least constellation cultivators, but the insectoids weren't. Thus, in theory, this kind of battle didn't pose too much pressure for the cultivators. Lu Yi moved forward alone. Not far to his left were the members of Team D9. They had been working together since they were at the True Lake stage. Throughout their entire time at the Spirit Sea stage, they had spent most of their time killing corpses on the Peerless Continent. After so many years of working together, they had a tacit understanding of each other. The one at the front was the tall and mighty giant armor. His vitality was so strong that it did not seem like a constellation. Lin Yinxiu and Yi, who was riding on Hu Po, were behind him. Further behind them were third senior brother Xiao Xinghe and fourth senior brother Li Baxian. As for Feng Yuechan, she was surrounded in the center. The few of them noticed Lu Ye's gaze and turned to look at him. Li Baxian grinned and said, "Little junior brother, let us show you what senior brothers are capable of." Lu Yi nodded. "Then I'll have to take a good look." Speaking of which, he hadn't seen the Yu Yao fight for a long time. He didn't know how strong they were now. Looking to the right, it was the master Nian Yuxian, eldest senior brother Feng Wujiang and his wife. These two were not the only 9 states cultivators. The 300 constellation cultivators scattered into small teams almost at the same time as they rushed out of their respective warships. There were at least 4 to 5 people and at most 6 to 7 people. This scene not only surprised the cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world, but also the cultivators from the 4 galaxies. Although the 9 states cultivators were all in the early constellation realm, each team moved in a strict manner. There was a strange pattern to it. On the other hand, although they would also form teams, they seemed to lack a strange sense of closeness. The Yu Yao cultivators at the front had already begun to fight with the insectoids. Intense waves of magic power erupted from the battlefields. After a while, the constellation realm cultivators also began to attack. The power of many spells swept towards the insectoid swarm from all directions. Although they caused some damage, they couldn't stop the insectoid swarm from advancing. Resisting the attacks of many spells, the insectoid swarm came closer. The battle had completely erupted. All over the battlefield, strange phenomena suddenly appeared out of thin air. Those were the strange phenomena formed by battle formations. The most numerous one was the Black Tortoise battle formation. Many huge black tortoises formed by spiritual energy appeared on the battlefield with their heads held high and chests puffed out, causing both sides to be stunned. The constellation realm cultivators naturally didn't know what was going on, but the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world cultivators saw it clearly. Those battle formations were formed by the cultivators from the 9 heavens realm. They were shocked. Were the cultivators from the 9 heavens realm so close to each other? It was difficult to form a battle formation in such a battle. It required years of familiarity with each other to form a tacit understanding. Their auras had to be connected and flow as one. The constellation realm cultivators all had their own things to do. It was impossible for them to stay together and practice battle formations unless some sects had special requirements. There were also cultivators from the Green Dawn Dao world and Jade Conch world who could form battle formations. However, those cultivators were all their closest brothers and sisters, and even their family members. However, the 9 heavens realm cultivators didn't fall behind. They formed teams of several people and formed different battle formations with ease. There was no sign of unfamiliarity in their cooperation. The 9 states cultivators also knew that they were weaker, so they chose battle formations that were mainly defensive. This was why there were so many black tortoises on the battlefield. Even if the strange phenomena from the other battle formations weren't black tortoises, most of them were good at defense. Under the impact of the battle formations, a large number of insectoids were killed. Lu Ye's figure was constantly moving, and he had already sent out a series of imperial artifacts in all directions, using them as support for his leaping technique. Using his divine thoughts, he found that the insectoids he found were all at the late stage of the constellation realm. As the Pan Shan saber flashed, even the insectoid's hard shells couldn't withstand a sharp blow. If it was the Pan Shan saber in the past, it wouldn't have such an effect even if it was blessed with the divine blade spiritual inscriptions. However, the Pan Shan saber that Fang transformed into had extremely high sharpness. Together with the divine blade, no one in the constellation realm could block it. He wasn't worried about the cultivators on his side suffering casualties in such a battle. There were always casualties in a battle. Even if it wasn't here, it would be in the myriad phenomenon sea or somewhere else. However, compared to the possible casualties, the benefits that participating in such a battle would bring to the cultivators on his side were hard to come by. On the battlefield, veterans grew up step by step from new recruits. Participating in such a battle was enough to train the cultivators on his side into qualified veterans. In the future, if they were to encounter similar battles, they would have more experience in handling and dealing with them. Moreover, in this battle, the possibility of casualties was not high. Soon, the cultivators from the Qingli Daoist world and the Yukong world found another problem. Compared to the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm who could all form a battle formation, their fighting style was more surprising. For a long time, because the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm were at the early stage of the Constellation realm, the cultivators from the Qingli Daoist world and the Yukong world felt that they were superior to them. However, looking at it now, the fighting style of the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm was extremely fierce and sharp. Even when facing the insectoids who were stronger than them, they didn't fear them and fought fiercely. This strange scene made it seem as if they were at the early stage of the Constellation realm, while the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm were at the late stage of the Constellation realm. The cultivators from the two worlds were a little confused. They couldn't understand what the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm had experienced in their growth. How could they fight so fiercely? It seemed that no one was afraid of death. The insectoids were ferocious enough, but compared to the cultivators from the Nine Heavens realm, they were like cats meeting tigers. They were suppressed in momentum. Even if they were slightly stronger, it was easy to be at a disadvantage in the battle. Lu Yi was still leaping. With the help of the many imperial weapons he had used in advance, the leaping technique greatly reduced the consumption of his body. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare to leaping for such a long time in such a battle. His figure suddenly moved to a corner of the battlefield. The timing of his appearance was very clever. There was an insectoid at the late stage of the Constellation realm who had his back to him. Lu Yi raised his sword and cut off the insectoid's head. "Little junior brother, you've gone too far," Li Baxian shouted in dissatisfaction. They were fighting fiercely with the insectoid, but they didn't expect that their little junior brother would steal the kill. Lu Yi glanced at their battle formation and was slightly surprised. Because looking at the battlefield, there were many cultivators from the 9 provinces in the Black Tortoise battle formation. There were at least 30 to 40 Black Tortoise apparitions. However, Team D9's Black Tortoise was clearly different. The other Black Tortoise apparitions were only apparitions, but Team D9's Black Tortoise was clearly much more solid. Moreover, some strange patterns appeared on its back. Those strange patterns flickered as if they were breathing. Lu Yi even felt that these strange patterns had some strange and close connection with the giant armor in the battle formation. He understood that the abnormality of Team D9's battle formation definitely came from the giant armor. Because he remembered, the Yao core that the giant armor had swallowed seemed to be related to the Black Tortoise. It was precisely because Team D9's Black Tortoise battle formation was stronger that they could fight against a late-stage Constellation Realm insectoid as early-stage Constellation Realm cultivators. The other battle formations didn't have this ability. At most, they could fight against a mid-stage Constellation Realm insectoid. Ignoring Li Baxian's shouts, Lu Yi flashed away. Li Baxian was furious, but there was nothing he could do. He could only look for more opponents. Although the battle wasn't completely one-sided, the Cultivator Alliance clearly had the absolute upper hand. If they continued fighting like this, it wouldn't be long before all the insectoids that came out of the hive were killed. Chapter 1595. The battle was progressing smoothly. The Constellation cultivators had the upper hand, and the Yu Yao cultivators were suppressing the insectoid Yu Yao. This time the 4 star systems had joined forces. Regardless of whether it was the Sunshine or Yu Yao cultivators, they outnumbered the insectoids by a large margin. As a result, all the insectoid Yu Yao cultivators were targeted. The Constellation cultivators could do whatever they wanted. Some Yu Yao cultivators couldn't even find a suitable opponent, so they could only bully the weak. With the Yu Yao cultivators facing off against the Constellation cultivators, they could kill them however they wanted. In the short time it took for an incense stick to burn, nearly 30% of the insectoids had died. Even the Yu Yao cultivators had died in battle. Under such circumstances, the insectoid situation was even worse. Lu Yi swept back and forth across the vast battlefield, bringing death wherever he went. He even had his eyes on an early-stage moon jade insectoid. Lu Yi did not know which galaxy this insectoid was from, but he was also an early-stage moonjade insectoid. The two sides were locked in a fierce battle. Lu Yi was about to use his sweeping technique to sneak attack the Yu Yao cultivator, to see if he could create an opportunity for his Yu Yao. However, before he could do anything, an angry roar suddenly came from the insectoid nest. The roar was a little strange. It was filled with anger and shock, as if something unbelievable had happened. As the roar rang out, a powerful aura suddenly disappeared. Lu Yi raised an eyebrow and turned to look at the insectoid nest. Since the start of the battle, only the sunshine cultivators were fighting in the insectoid nest. The 4 sunshine cultivators from the 4 star systems were fighting against 2 insectoids. Therefore, the insectoid nest was constantly emitting violent energy fluctuations, making it seem very chaotic. Now that the aura had disappeared, it meant that a sunshine cultivator had died. Lu Yi was thinking that the sunshine cultivators from the 4 star systems were quite strong. They actually managed to kill an insectoid sunshine cultivator so quickly. After all, it was rare for a battle between sunshine cultivators to be decided in a short time, unless the difference in strength was too great. However, considering that the 4 star systems were fighting 2 against 1, it wasn't too strange. Unexpectedly, when he looked over, Li Guan, who had been guarding the insectoid nest all this time, suddenly changed his expression. He turned into a streak of sword light and pounced toward the insectoid nest. Lu Yi was startled and immediately realized that something was wrong. Li Guan was stationed outside the hive to prevent Hikaru from escaping. She was obviously a sword cultivator. If Hikaru really wanted to escape, she was confident that she could stop him. However, at this moment she had actually rushed into the insect nest. This was clearly not normal. The one who died just now. Could it be the Zerg Sunshine? Lu Yi found it hard to believe. But if that weren't the case, Li Guan wouldn't have reacted in such a way. Moreover, this was completely illogical. They were fighting 2 against 1, so how could one of them be killed instead? Is the Zerg race's Sunshine that strong? Just as he was puzzled, a voice suddenly came from the insect nest. It was none other than Li Guan, who had just broken into the nest. All Quiet Moon cultivators return to the warship immediately and await further orders. Anyone who dares to disobey will be killed by the cultivators of the 3 forces. When the order was issued, all the cultivators on the battlefield were confused. None of them knew what was going on. This war had been pushed forward by the joint efforts of the 4 star systems, and it had been progressing smoothly. But now, at this critical juncture, Li Guan had issued such a strange order. Moreover, it was after Hikaru had died in the hive. Right after Li Guan's cold voice resounded, Wuxia of the Daluo Galaxy shouted loudly, "Daluo Galaxy cultivators, obey orders." In the next instant, Bai Jin's voice resounded. "Fellow Taoists, why are you targeting my Jingyue? This time, the 4 sides have joined forces, and Quiet Moon has also contributed greatly. Isn't it inappropriate to burn the bridge after crossing the river?" Originally, after hearing Li Guan's order, the cultivators of Jingyue were confused. They didn't know why they were suddenly asked to return to the battleship when the battle was going well. At this moment, when they heard the voice of Rizhao, they suddenly had some doubts in their heart. The 4 star systems had coexisted in this part of the universe for many years. It was impossible for there to be no conflicts between them. However, they would not openly offend each other to avoid triggering a war between star systems. Hence, when Hikaru and Daluo started arguing, the cultivators below began to think that Hikaru and Daluo had joined forces to target Quiet Moon. Regardless of what the cultivators of the 4 star systems were thinking, Lu Ye's expression was solemn. This was because Hikaru from all 3 star systems had spoken, but Qinzong from Beishan had not. Recalling the commotion caused by Rizhao's death and Qinzongban's injuries, Lu Yi suddenly had a bad feeling in his heart. Li Guan's voice was heard again. "Bai Jin, are you still trying to fish in troubled waters at a time like this?" Then she cried out, "Bai Jin from Quiet Moon is a blood breed in disguise. Qinzong from Beishan has been killed." It wasn't appropriate to say this just now to avoid disturbing the morale of the troops. Hence, Li Guan ordered the cultivators of Quiet Moon to return to the warship and wait for further orders. Since Bai Jin was a blood breed in disguise, no one knew if there were more blood breeds hiding in Quiet Moon. If they suddenly attacked their allies in such a chaotic battle, they would definitely be killed. Since there was no way to tell whether the cultivators of Quiet Moon were blood breeds in disguise, the best way was to have them return to the warship and wait for further orders. Those who weren't blood breeds would naturally obey orders, but those who were blood breeds would take advantage of the situation to stir up trouble. At this point, Bai Jin still wanted to use words to confuse the troops, so Li Guan had no choice but to tell the truth. When Li Guan's voice fell, the entire battlefield was in an uproar, especially the cultivators from Beixin Galaxy. They were all stunned and could hardly believe their ears. When the sound of Hikaru's death came from the Zerg's nest, everyone thought it was Hikaru of the Zerg who was killed. Who would have thought that the one who died was not in Zerg, but Qinzong of Beixian? Hikaru of Quiet Moon was a pillar of strength in any galaxy. The death of any one of them was a great loss. There were only 2 Hikaru of Quiet Moon in the entire Beixin Galaxy. Now that Qinzong was dead, Beixin Galaxy was left with only 1 Hikaru. On the battlefield, Lu Yi was reaping the lives of the Zerg with a cold face. Because he had doubts in his heart, when Li Guan said those words, he wasn't too surprised. He finally understood why Bai Jin gave him a strange feeling when he saw him in the central hall. At that time, Lu Yi didn't know what kind of strange feeling it was. In front of Hikaru, he couldn't delve into it. Now that he thought about it, if the other party was a blood breed, then it made sense. He had refined a large amount of the blood kindred Saint Blood, and it could be said that his holiness was so strong that no blood kindred in the universe could be compared to him. Therefore, although he still maintained his human form, he had a hidden sense of the blood kindred. That strange feeling obviously came from the blood kindred's bloodline. Previously, when he warned Lan Qiue, he thought that there might be blood breeds who cultivated some mysterious secret arts that could hide their blood breed characteristics and disguise themselves as humans. Who would have thought that he would really encounter one? There might be more than one. Jingyue had Bai Jin, so who knew if there were more hidden blood breeds? That was why Li Guan gave such an order. However, this Bai Jin was also very powerful. Although he didn't know how long he had been hiding in the Jingyue Galaxy, he might have cultivated Hikaru without being exposed. Qinzong's death was unjust. He must have been targeted by Bai Jin long ago. Taking advantage of his injury and fighting Hikaru, Bai Jin suddenly killed him. Naturally, Qinzong couldn't resist. However, what Lu Yi couldn't understand was why Bai Jin exposed himself at this time. He had disguised himself as a human and operated in Jingyue for many years. He must have his own purpose. It seemed wrong to say that he exposed himself for the sake of 2 Zerg. Because even if he exposed his identity at this moment, and even killed Qinzong, the Zerg still couldn't gain the upper hand. Maybe Hikaru could compete. In the Zerg nest, it was a 3 versus 3 situation, but Hikaru was still no match for the Zerg. Or was his purpose just to save the 2 Zerg Hikaru? It was said that the Zerg and blood breeds were in cahoots, snakes and rats in the same nest, but their relationship was a little too good. Just when Lu Yi was puzzled, suddenly a scream of horror came from a certain direction. Vampires. Many vampires are coming. Lu Yi hurriedly looked up and his expression froze. This was because in the distant starry sky, a large bloody light was sweeping over. It was like a sea of blood, and it wasn't just in the direction he was looking at. It was everywhere. Lu Ye's heart skipped a beat, realizing that they were in big trouble. Bai Jin's identity was exposed at this time not just to save the 2 Zerg Hikaru, but also to destroy the 4-star system alliance. In other words, this was a joint operation between the Zerg and blood breeds, and they had reached the most critical moment. Lu Yi suddenly understood what Bai Jin was planning. He was planning to take down the 4-star system itself. This was because if the allied forces of the 4 galaxies were wiped out in this battle, Rizhao alone would lose 4 members, and Yu Yao's forces would suffer countless casualties. When the time came, the insectoids and vampires would seize this great victory and storm the Indefinite star system. How would Indefinite defend herself? Once Indefinite was taken down, the remaining 3 star systems could be taken down one by one. The 4-star system was a big fat piece of meat for the Zerg and blood breeds. The blood breeds could enslave the creatures in the 4-star system, and the Zerg could freely devour the vitality of the various star systems to expand their numbers. Thus, even though the Zerg had suffered heavy casualties so far, as long as they won this battle, the Zerg would reap hundreds or even thousands of times the rewards. Looking at it this way, it wasn't a coincidence that this hive had drifted here. It was specifically targeting the 4-star system. With Bai Jin as their spy, the Zerg and blood breeds had long coveted the 4-star system. This scheme had probably been in the works for many years. There was one thing that puzzled Lu Yi. Chapter 1596. Lu Yi suddenly recalled why the insectoids had acted so strangely at the start of the battle. They hadn't concentrated their forces in one direction but had instead spread them out. It seemed like a brainless move, but in reality, it was to divert the attention of the cultivators from the four galaxies so that the bloodlings could surround the battlefield. Reality proved that their plan was very successful. All the cultivators from the four galaxies, including those from the three realms on Lu Ye's side, were immersed in the joy of killing the insectoids. They didn't pay much attention to the battle outside. That was until the bloodlings appeared. But by then there was no point in noticing. Waves of blood came from all directions at an extremely fast speed. This speed was clearly due to the fact that there was an expert controlling the sea of blood. In just a short moment, the entire battlefield was practically surrounded by the sea of blood. However, the sea of blood showed no signs of stopping. It seemed as if it was going to envelop the entire battlefield. Once the blood sea descended, the human cultivators would be forced into a passive position. The bloodlings and insectoids, on the other hand, would be like fish in water. Lu Yi had used the blood sea to kill enemies before, so he was very familiar with its mysteries. Many thoughts flashed through his mind. His first thought was to quickly gather the cultivators of the three realms and escape. The blood sea hadn't completely surrounded them yet, so there was still a gap. They might still have a chance. However, Kang Cheng's previous arrangements had foiled his plans. The cultivators of the three realms were scattered all over the battlefield. It was impossible for him to gather everyone in a short time. Under such circumstances, not to mention gathering the cultivators of the three dimensions in a short period of time, even gathering the cultivators of the 9 provinces was utterly impossible. Everyone, including the cultivators of the 4 galaxies, were swept into the battle and were utterly unable to escape easily. What should I do? Lu Yi asked himself over and over again, but he couldn't think of a solution. He also thought of an even more serious consequence. If the insectoids and bloodlings really took over the 4 galaxies, the Jade Conch tribe would be in danger. When the time came, the 2 races would have to go through the Thousand Hills Grave and the Chaotic Explosion Zone to explore the outside world. Once they entered the Jade Conch galaxy, it could be said that the Jade Conch tribe and Apiron were basically interdependent. An even more violent energy fluctuation than before came from the insectoid nest. Lu Yi instinctively turned to look and saw that the nest had suddenly shattered. Even though the hive was extremely sturdy, it was unable to withstand the constant battle between the Sunshine State cultivators. At this moment, it finally exploded into pieces. 3 of them were Ningbu Ao Li Guan and Luoxia of Big Luo. Of the other 3, 2 were obviously Hikari from the Zerg and 1 was obviously a blood breed. He looked 70% similar to Bai Jin, but compared to Bai Jin he was obviously much taller, and his skin was blood red. At this moment, the 6 Rizhao were fighting fiercely against each other. When the cultivators of the mysterious North Star system didn't see Qinzong's figure, they finally realized that Qinzong had fallen. The feelings of the cultivators of Jingyue constellation were even more complicated. Bai Jin, who was originally a mainstay of this world, was actually a vampire in disguise. Moreover, he had killed an ally of Rizhao, which made them feel ashamed and uneasy. As the terrifying energy spread, 3 rays of blood-red light came from different directions from the sea of blood. All 3 rays of blood-red light emanated the aura of a Sunshine State cultivator. This scene made the hearts of all the cultivators turn cold. They knew that this was really the end. The blood breed had sent 3 Sunshine State cultivators, and these were only the ones who had shown their faces. No one knew if there were others who hadn't shown their faces yet. In a one-on-one fight, Ningbu Ao and the others had been able to hold their ground. But now that the 3 blood breeds had joined the battle, it was their turn to fight 2 Sunshine State cultivators. The situation was not looking good. "Fellow cultivator Lu, come with me." Suddenly, a Yu Yao rushed toward Lu Yi with a panicked expression. As he approached, he shouted. Judging by the spiritual energy fluctuations around him, he was obviously an early Yu Yao. Lu Yi turned his head and glanced at him. He responded with a yes, and charged straight at him. The moment they drew near, the panic on the Yu Yao's face disappeared. He reached out to grab Lu Yi. Magic energy surged in his palm, forming a vortex. Immediately, an invisible force pulled Lu Ye's body. Lu Ye's expression didn't change. He seemed to have expected this. His body glowed with blood-red light, and in an instant, a sea of blood spread out, enveloping him and Yu Yao. The other party clearly hadn't expected such a turn of events. He was caught off guard by the sea of blood. He was shocked. As far as he knew, Lu Yi was a weapon cultivator. It was rare for him to be able to use such an exquisite blood Dao secret technique. But in the next moment, Yu Yao's expression changed. That was because the sea of blood emanated an incomparably strong pressure that he couldn't resist. Under the cover of this mysterious pressure, Yu Yao felt his strength being greatly suppressed. The flow of magic energy in his body was obscure, and even his blood and chi seemed to be on the verge of freezing. Then a saber light flashed and slashed at his neck. Even the mountain plate blade enhanced with a divine edge couldn't cut off Yu Yao's head. It only cut halfway in. It was obvious how strong his physique was. Yu Yao's expression was pained. He cocked his head and looked at Lu Yi in disbelief. A holy seed? This weapon cultivator in front of him didn't use any Blood Dao secret technique. It was the purest blood sea technique of the blood tribe. What made him even more uneasy was that the sea of blood was surging with a holy aura so strong that it was almost tangible. He didn't even dare to think about it. How could there be a holy seed with such a strong holy aura in this world? How much holy blood did one refine to reach this level? Fellow Taoist, please have mercy. I'm a member of the blood tribe. Yu Yao hurriedly cried out in panic. Although he didn't understand why Lu Yi was a holy seed, since he was a holy seed he was one of them. Lu Ye's expression was indifferent. Got it? His other hand suddenly grabbed the mountain plate blade's hilt. He exerted force with both hands and the blade, which was half buried in Yu Yao's neck, slashed down. Yu Yao's head flew into the air, and his eyes were wide open as he died with remaining grievances. He really didn't understand why Lu Yi would still kill him even after he had revealed his identity as a member of the blood tribe. The sea of blood disappeared and Lu Ye's figure appeared. The mountain plate blade wasn't stained by a single drop of blood. He had sensed it the moment Yu Yao approached him. This Yu Yao gave him a similar feeling to Bai Jin, so he immediately understood that she was also a member of the blood tribe in disguise. If it were an ordinary Yu Yao, Lu Yi wouldn't have been able to kill her so easily. However, Yu Yao of the blood tribe was his nemesis. Back when he left the Blue Jade realm, a late-stage Yu Yao had chased after him, but he had killed the Yu Yao. This time he was facing an early-stage Yu Yao. Of course, he was only able to kill late-stage Yu Yao thanks to Li Shang's soul battle. Otherwise, with his strength at the time, he wouldn't have been able to do anything to her. But things were different now. The mountain plate blade was transformed from pyrolite, and it was incomparably sharp. Yu Yao's physical body was strong, but it was suppressed by the holy aura. She couldn't block pyrolite's attack at all. Chaos, everything was in chaos. Li Guan had already ordered the Quiet Moon cultivators to return to the battleship and wait for further orders. Now that the blood tribe had launched a large-scale attack, the situation became even more chaotic. It was impossible for the cultivators of Quiet Moon to return to the warships. There was no telling how many vampires were hiding among them. Therefore, the cultivators of the other three galaxies had their hands tied when fighting against the enemy. No one knew if they would be ambushed secretly. Lu Yi gazed at the chaotic battlefield and the sea of blood that was spreading out from all directions. He knew that if he didn't do something now, the allied forces of the four-star systems and the cultivators of the three realms would all die here. In fact, even he himself might not be able to escape alive. However, on such a large battlefield, even if he was a cultivator of the absolute sunshine realm, would he have the ability to turn the tide, much less a single constellation realm cultivator? Lu Yi suddenly flipped his hand and something appeared in his palm. He lowered his head and glanced at it. He didn't know if his idea would work or not, and even if it did, it was hard to say how effective it would be. However, since things had already come to this point, he could only try everything he could. He put the thing in his hand to his mouth and pressed a few sound holes with his fingers. He stirred his breath and gently blew on it. Even in the starry sky, there was a low sound coming from the thing in his hand. The surrounding cultivators looked over curiously in panic. No one knew why Lu Yi would take out a bone sun and play it in such a terrible way. However, no one was paying attention to him anymore. As the sea of blood approached, everyone was thinking about how to protect themselves. A figure suddenly moved to Lu Ye's side. It was Luan Xiao. She looked fine and the spear in her hand was still stained with blood. It should be the result of the battle with the insect tribe. After all, she was in the late stage of the full moon realm. Without the absolute sunshine, almost no one on the battlefield could pose a threat to her life. Looking at Lu Yi, Luan Xiao looked guilty. I'm sorry. Kang Qing had originally wanted them to head to Apeiron first, and discuss the matter of setting off for the Wanxiang Sea after the battle was over. However, Luan Xiao felt that this was a rare opportunity, and wanted to join in to experience it. Now that she had joined in on the fun, things had turned out well. The cultivators of the three realms had set off from the Qingli Dao world with great ambition, but they were still halfway there and were about to be wiped out by the insect tribe and the blood clan. Lu Yi continued to play the bone sun for a while before putting it away in disappointment. He said, "Joining the battle here was the decision of me and my friend. If there are any consequences, we will bear them together. You don't have to blame yourself. Even if we really go to indefinite first, we may not be able to avoid this disaster. After the insect tribe and the blood clan take over the Four Directions galaxy, they will first deal with the indefinite galaxy. When that happens, we will also be involved in it. Moreover, once the insect tribe and the blood clan take over the Four Directions galaxy, the first to suffer would be the Jade Snail galaxy. My friend, please help me gather the three realms." Chapter 1597. Team D9 was fighting hard against the enemy, and there were two other teams from the 9 states beside them. The situation was chaotic, and the cultivators from the 4 constellations were at a loss. However, the cultivators from the 9 states had experienced many big and small battles, so they had a certain ability to adapt. In the face of such sudden changes, they performed much better than the cultivators from the 4 constellations. They were trying to find a way to gather, but unfortunately, because they were too scattered, only 2 teams met up with Team D9. The other teams also adhered to the principle of proximity and moved closer to each other. Their approach undoubtedly influenced the cultivators from the Qingli Dao world and the Yukong world, and they all gathered towards the teams from the 9 states. "Follow me." Lu Yi came to the side of Team D9, called out, and slashed forward with his saber. The crowd did not say a word and followed closely. Lu Yi's figure was like a shuttle, moving forward on the battlefield. The blood kindred had not spread the sea of blood to the center of the battlefield for the time being, only completing the encirclement on the periphery. The insect clan on this side of the battlefield was already at a disadvantage, so there was not much resistance along the way. The more he moved forward, the more cultivators from the 3 realms followed behind him. Not only that, even the cultivators from the 4 constellations voluntarily joined in, making the group of cultivators behind Lu Yi stronger and stronger. Time was too short, and Lu Yi had no time to find all the cultivators from the 3 realms. Seeing that the sea of blood of the blood kindred had already penetrated, he had no choice but to lead the cultivators behind him back to the location of a warship. Second senior sister Shui Yuan and Hua Xi were on this warship. The 2 of them were medical cultivators and were not good at fighting, so they did not enter the battlefield during the previous battle, but stayed on the warship to wait for orders. This way, if there were injured cultivators, they could return to the warship to be treated. Yaya was also left on this warship by Lu Yi and handed over to Hua Xi to take care of. If there was a relatively safe place on the entire battlefield, it would be this warship. When Lu Yi led a large group of cultivators back, Yuan Xiao also rushed back. She gathered more cultivators from the 3 realms. After all, her cultivation was higher and she could move faster. Lu Yi swept his gaze over the area, his expression grim. Although he and Yuan Xiao had hurried over, they had still only gathered about half of the cultivators of the 3 realms. At this time, it was unrealistic for them to send a message to gather the others. There were battles everywhere. Not to mention whether the cultivators of the 3 realms had the time to investigate the sound talismans. Even if they did, they wouldn't be able to rush over without sufficient strength. Yuan Xiao hurriedly said, "I'll go look for it again. I'll have to trouble fellow Taoists to stay here." Lu Yi quickly stopped her. "Stay here, I'll go look for it." Lu Yi quickly stopped her. "You stay here, I'll go look for it." Once the sea of blood was completely unleashed, Yuan Xiao would be hard-pressed to do anything even though she was at the Moon Jade late stage. Moreover, because her cultivation was higher, it was very likely that she would be targeted by the powerful beings of the blood tribe. Lu Yi himself, on the other hand, was only a late-stage constellation realm cultivator. He also had the blood race's secret arts, so it was easier for him to do things. Leaving Yuan Xiao here was undoubtedly the safer choice. Lu Yi then looked at Lan Qiyu. "Junior sister, I'll leave this to you. If they wanted to fight against the blood tribe in the Sea of Blood, using the same blood race's secret arts was undoubtedly the best way." Lu Yi wanted to find the cultivators of the 3 realms who had been separated, so Lan Qiyu just happened to stay here to assist Yuan Xiao. Along the way, Lu Yi had already taught Lan Qiyu the Holy Convergence technique and the Blood Cry technique. These 2 blood races' secret arts were learned from the blood tribe when he was in the Alpha Origin realm. The former could restrain one's own holy nature, making it easier to cooperate with other blood race members. The latter was used to find other blood race members, so it wouldn't be of much use at this time. Although Lan Qiyue's cultivation wasn't high, she had refined a drop of sacred blood, so there was still some holy nature in her body. With the holy convergence technique, she could restrain her own holy nature and burst it out at the right time. It would definitely have a miraculous effect. With Wan Xiaoa and Lan Qiyue working together, and with Yaya secretly keeping watch, the problem of the warship wasn't big, unless the blood race had other Sunshine Realm cultivators hiding. Lan Qiyue naturally understood Lu Ye's intentions and nodded solemnly. "Senior brother, don't worry, I know what to do." Lu Ye's figure flickered and void spirit runes appeared under his feet. He disappeared, and when he reappeared, he was already in a sea of blood. After such a long time, the blood race's sea of blood had almost completely infiltrated the battlefield. The only place it hadn't penetrated was the battlefield where the Sunshine Realm cultivators were. But the Sunshine Realm cultivators' battlefield had 3 blood race cultivators joining in, and there was already a sea of blood there, surging like a tide. Inside the sea of blood, Lu Yi immediately activated the blood race's secret arts, and his own sea of blood spread out in all directions. He was now at the late-stage constellation realm, and his body was full of vitality. The sea of blood covered a large area, and within the range, everything could be reflected in his mind with just a thought. At this moment, a group of cultivators was running around in the sea of blood like headless flies. They were tired of dealing with the blood race's attacks, and just when they thought that they were doomed, their vision suddenly became clear. Originally, because of the interference of the sea of blood, they couldn't detect the blood race's movements in time and were restrained in every way. But now, the interference suddenly disappeared, and they could clearly sense all the movements of the enemies nearby. They were instantly confused because there was only one possibility for such a situation, and that was that the blood race was secretly helping them. But would such a thing happen? They couldn't understand why, but this kind of help was real. They immediately cheered up and took advantage of the blood race's attack to kill them when they were unprepared. Just as they finished off a few blood race cultivators, the cultivators felt a kind of guidance coming from the sea of blood beside them. At the same time, a person's voice sounded in their ears. "Follow me." They didn't know who it was, but the cultivators still followed the guidance and moved forward. Although they were still in the sea of blood, the interference from before was no longer there. As they moved forward, more and more cultivators gathered around them. Among them were many cultivators from the 4 galaxies, and there were also cultivators from the 3 realms. They took some time to talk with each other, and they found that everyone was in the same situation. They were originally trapped in the sea of blood and couldn't tell the direction, but the interference of the sea of blood suddenly disappeared, and then there was a strange guidance guiding them forward. The cultivators from the 4 galaxies didn't know what was going on, but the cultivators from the 9 provinces knew that this was Lu Ye's doing. Back then, when the cultivators of the 9 provinces went on an expedition to the blood refinement realm, many of the blood race's experts were completely restrained by Lu Yi. Although these blood race cultivators they encountered now were much stronger than those from the blood refinement realm, the restraint didn't seem to have changed. They couldn't help but sigh with emotion. Lu Yi was Lu Yi after all. He could change the world in the 9 provinces, and he was just as dazzling on the star boat. In the sea of blood that Lu Yi displayed, the number of cultivators grew larger and larger. Not only were there cultivators from the 4 galaxies, but there were also Yu Yao. These Yu Yao all came from the 4 galaxies. They were originally struggling to cope with the blood race's Yu Yao, but for some reason the blood race's Yu Yao suddenly became weak. Their strength fell sharply and they were easily killed on the spot. Even now Yu Yao still couldn't figure out why this happened. Half a day later, Lu Yi led a large group of cultivators back to the location of the battleship. There were many blood race cultivators surging in the sea of blood, besieging the battleship. Even though Wan Xiaoa, a late-stage Yu Yao, was personally overseeing the situation, and Lan Qiyue was secretly helping them, the situation was still very dangerous. Lu Yi brought the cultivators back at the right time. His side strength suddenly increased, and in the blink of an eye, they killed the blood race cultivators besieging the battleship. Many cultivators joined up with Wan Xiaoa and the others, and the battleship's defensive strength increased greatly. Lu Yi didn't stop to rest and charged out. He had just walked around the battlefield. He had found all the cultivators of the 3 realms he could find. Those who couldn't were probably already dead. There were enough cultivators gathered around the battleship. Even the Yu Yao had about 10 of them. They could protect themselves for a short period of time. However, the decision-maker for this battle wasn't the Yu Yao or the Yu constellations. It was Rizhao. If Ning Bueo and the others could win, they would win this battle. If Ning Bueo and the others lost, they would lose this battle without a doubt. Then all the human cultivators on the battlefield would be slaughtered. That was why Lu Yi wanted to see if he could help Ning Bueo and the others with his own strength. The suppression of the holy attribute should be useful against the blood race cultivator, Rizhao. After all, it was a suppression of the bloodline. It had nothing to do with cultivation. The blood race army's blood sea didn't spread toward Rizhao's battlefield. Even if it did, it would be pointless. The intensity of the battle was beyond what they could help with. Lu Yi came to the edge of the blood sea and looked over. His heart sank. Although he couldn't see the exact situation on Rizhao's battlefield, he could tell from the energy waves that Ning Bueo and the others were in dire straits. 3 against 6 meant that each of them had to deal with 2 elites of the same level. Blood race cultivator Rizhao had also used the blood sea to create an advantage for himself. Ning Bueo and the others were powerless. Lu Yi wanted to sneak into Rizhao's battlefield and use his holy attribute to surprise the blood race cultivators. But looking at the situation, he knew that wouldn't work. Just the shockwaves from Rizhao's battle weren't something he could withstand. How could he get close to the battlefield? Even if he managed to get close, his life would be in danger. If Rizhao killed him with a slap, it would be a terrible death. Should he ask Ye to send him over? But Ye's situation was strange. Every time she used Rizhao's power, she would become weak. She couldn't use Rizhao's power for long. Lu Yi wasn't sure if she could hold on. More importantly, even if he used his holy attribute to suppress the blood race, they only had 3 Rizhao. If they couldn't kill blood race cultivator Rizhao in a short amount of time, they would still die. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.